Hello friends, and welcome to 100 Days in Minecraft Equestrian Edition, the movie. You can download the mod pack I use via the link below, shop pinehavenponies.co.uk for model horses, and join our Equestrian Minecraft server on both Bedrock and Java. The IP is pinecraftequestrian.com, and if you need help joining, I have 2 videos on my website making it super simple. Alright, please enjoy. And day 1 begun. I was really happy with my spawn point as I already had access to wood and some fruits. I got myself equipped with a wooden pick, then upgraded to stone, also crafting a sword and an axe. I also made a boat since there appeared to be quite a lot of water around and it would make travelling a lot easier. Pam's Harvest Craft Trees mod came in very handy since food was already in abundance. I smacked up some cows and gathered more wood as I started to make my way inland along a river. I came across a pretty large cave, but before I even stepped foot inside, a Satan spawn ran out and tried to get me. Luckily, he couldn't swim. Night fell very quickly, and like a true newbie, I made myself a little hidey hole in the side of a mountain, and all through the night I did mining. I was hoping for iron, but had no such luck. Day 2, I emerged from my tunnels and slayed my first zombie. I wanted to take a look in the cave I saw yesterday, but honestly, the shaders I was using made it so hard to see. It made me really spooked how I could hear the mobs but not see them, so I just ducked out and grabbed an exposed copper vein just outside. I hadn't played much survival beyond 1.15.2, so I didn't know that copper was practically useless. I smelted that and hopped into my boat to travel upstream. I chose a forest to get out at and I found some wild doggies. I really wish I had some bones on me, but I didn't, so unfortunately I had to keep moving. My goal for today was to try and get a backpack, and for that I needed leather and string. I was kind of dreading having to smack up a spider until I spotted this tree with cobwebs growing on it. When harvested, the tree gave me string, so I was well chuffed at that. At this point, I had been traveling most of the day, so it was time to burrow underground again and keep mining. That night, I also made my backpack, and it was going to be a lifesaver since it gave me so much more portable storage. Day 3 began with me spotting a forest fire. I knew it had been caused by lava nearby, but I didn't want the whole forest to burn down since there could have been animals in there. I did my best to slow down the fire and stop the other trees from catching, and my conservation efforts were a success. I was rewarded by seeing my first bee. I didn't have a base to bring him back to yet, so I just left him be. Bee, get it? Anyway, I made my way back across the river and found this absolutely lovely plains area. It was connected by the river, there was a forest nearby, and the land wasn't too hilly, so I thought this would be a great place to set up camp for now. I started clearing some land, almost drowned in a flooded crevasse, and started laying down some cobble for my house. Very quickly, I realized my skills for stable building did not extend to houses. I struggled for a while and then decided to go cave mining for the night. I found quite a few coal deposits, but no iron. Day 4, I tore down the house foundations in favour for a makeshift wood tent. I had managed to kill 2 sheep, so I did make myself a bedroll. I took the time to go and find a tutorial for the house so that I could build something really nice. After looking around, I settled on this house by a croissant cat, and the good thing about finding a tutorial is that I would know exactly how many blocks I needed of each material. My main concern was the concrete, and I did genuinely Google where to find concrete powder since it had been so long that I didn't even know you had to craft it. But sand and gravel were going to be easy enough to get, and it was more the white dye that concerned me. With the list of materials in mind, I went to go mining in an actual cave, not the tunnel. At the entrance of the cave, I completely noped out because it was so dark and so scary. I opted to turn off shaders for this particular cave run. As soon as my shaders were done loading, I went back to the game, only to be kindly greeted by my first creeper who blew me up. Then, I discovered that the bedroll does not in fact set your spawn point, and I was right back where I started. Yay! Luckily, I did know the way back, so I crafted a boat and was on my way. To be fair though, is it really a Minecraft playthrough if you don't get blown up by a creeper at some point? I got back and slept in my wooden tent, very much aware that if I died again, I would be sent right back to the start.
Day 5, I was reinvigorated by my frustration and stormed down to get my stuff. But I wasn't going to give up yet. As I went a little further, I found my first bits of iron. This started that strangely addictive process of mining. I wanted to grab everything I could. I ended up getting lapis, a whole bunch of coal, redstone, glowing sacks, and Kanzerite. Kanzerite was a key component in our equestrian goals because swem horses didn't spawn in the wild. I would need the Kanzerite to brew up a potion that would turn a regular horse into a swem horse. I had a pretty decent haul to bring back to camp, so I surfaced and slept. Day 6, I smelted my iron and treated myself to 9 pick and a full set of iron armor. I also crafted a campfire, and I didn't know this at the time, but that campfire would turn out to be very, very important to me. I decided to start farming, and instead of clearing an area, I used the natural small pond near my tent and tilled the area. I stuck a few seeds down and did some chest inventorying. That pretty much took the whole day, so I went back to sleep because I didn't want to risk mining at night in an open cave. Day 7, I was hungry for resources, so I made my way into the cave once again. This time though, I didn't make it too far before I misjudged my capabilities and went head on against a horde of mobs, only to be absolutely decimated. Once again, I made my way back home feeling pretty dejected, so I chefed up a sheep that I later cooked on my campfire to make myself feel better. I was absolutely dreading going back to that cave to get my stuff. Day 8, to cheer myself up, I made an animal wagon, and this was my new favorite thing ever. I put a chicken in it and used to set up a little pen where I would hopefully be able to catch more chickens for a coop. After some procrastinating, I did muster up the courage to go back down and get my stuff. I successfully yoinked my grave and scrabbled quickly to the surface. Day 9 was the day I conquered the mines. I spent the whole day down there. From morning to night, I fought and mined some more. I went so far that I couldn't remember how to get out, so I just used the dig straight up technique. When I did manage to get out, I realized it was the dead of night and I had to fight for my life until the sun rose. Day 10 brought a rather pressing issue. I didn't know where I was. I had forgotten to put a waypoint at my camp, and the caves made me completely lose my bearings. This was pretty problematic since I could choose a direction and just go the wrong way. I tried to follow my gut and went northeast from the hill. The minimap wasn't too helpful since I couldn't see anything around me. As I went, I spotted a village up top a mountain and figured it would be worth going up there to loot, and hopefully I could increase my render distance and try to see where my camp was. After climbing the hill and perusing the village for stuff like boots and hay bales, I suddenly noticed all the villagers were animals. In the texture pack, they were changed to look like wolves and foxes and other creatures, so the villagers actually looked really cute for once. I slapped up that render distance and used the Optifine zoom to my advantage. At first, I couldn't see anything of use, but I did see another village down in the valley. Eventually, I gave up and went back to looting, but I just had this feeling that I hadn't looked properly. I gave the area one last sweep, and that's when I spotted a pillar of smoke. I immediately knew this was my campfire. I was so thrilled, I almost couldn't believe I had found it. I was really lucky I had placed that campfire because the camp would have been much harder to locate without it. I made my way home, and the first thing I did was set a waypoint so that I would never lose it again. After all that excitement, day 11, I wanted to have a nice quiet day at the camp. I was greeted by a wild cow who then proceeded to turn away disgusted when I started cooking steak at my campfire. I headed to the nearby forest to grab some wood and made sure to replant saplings whenever I could. When it got late, I headed back and I thought about building a bridge over the river for easy access. Day 12 was equally as quiet as I just cleared some land in preparation for building. I made chests for storage and prepped a list of materials that I would need for my house. I had to get a whole lot of sand and gravel, but I didn't really want to destroy the area's natural beauty, so the plan was to go out tomorrow and look for a desert biome. Day 13, I set sail in my boat. I was hoping to just be able to follow the river as far as it would go, and I was pleasantly surprised that the river was really well connected and ran for a good length. This was great news since the boat was faster than walking and generally less dangerous. I made various stops for supplies and gravel, and then I was lucky enough to spot a desert biome. I made my way over ASAP and started gathering sand. The trip by boat had taken up most of the day, so it wasn't long before I had to start heading back. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to get all the way home before it was dark, and while I could have chanced it in the boat, I did spot a village that I would be safer at. Thankful for their lights and iron golem, I slept in a vacant house. Day 14 was a miraculous day. When I stepped out of the house, right at the tippy top of the hill, I spotted my first horse. I was very excited since this was the first one I had found so far. I quickly looted the village and made my way up to it. The horse was by himself and I didn't really want to leave him up here, so I psyched myself up for the arduous task of pushing this horse down the mountain and hopefully trap him in my boat. This horse absolutely did not want to leave, and I don't blame him because the views were stunning, but I really wanted him to come home with me. It took me ages to make any progress with him, but while I was doing so, I realized I should tame him to stop him from despawning. When I was a mere 40 blocks from my boat, I remembered I had a saddle in my inventory. This whole time, I had looted it from this village as well. A bit embarrassed, I rode down to the boat. At first I didn't think he was going to fit, but then he did. He wasn't happy at all about the boat ride home, and I did feel a little bad for abducting him, but I had a horsey now. On the way back, I saw an actual herd of horses. It felt like my lucky day for sure, and I tamed them all and went to sleep in my new bedroll. Day 16, I got the horse home safe and sound. I had nicknamed him Rocky because he looked a little bit like a Rocky Mountain horse, so I thought it suited him quite well. He shared a pen with the chicken for now. I did a few farm chores, but unfortunately still did not have enough sand, so I ventured out to continue gathering. Day 17 and 18 was spent entirely on getting sand and gravel. I was also prepping for another trip to the mines, and on day 19, I used the same cave as usual and mined up a bunch of ores. Everything was going swimmingly until I got a little too confident and misjudged the position of a water block, thus falling to my death. I then learned the importance of the sleeping bag because it didn't set your spawn point and it allowed you to sleep anywhere, but because I had slept in a bed at the village, that's where I ended up respawning. Day 20, I fought my way through the caves to get my stuff. On my way, I spotted a single diamond, so I grabbed my things and went to go get that diamond. I should have waypointed it or at least noted the coordinates, but I did not, so I spent a good chunk of time searching the cave. I did eventually find it and went straight back to mining. I found so many goodies, there were so many diamonds, and I even stumbled upon a mine shaft where I found my first name tag. Eventually it rolled over to day 21 and I was still in the mines, but before long I got a bit bored, so I decided to resurface. Now, this next part is by far the creepiest thing to ever happen to me in Minecraft. As I was digging straight up, out of nowhere, I hear a jukebox start to play. The music is haunting, and I even checked my settings to confirm the music was off. I tried so hard to locate the source, digging up and down and left and right, using the volume to tell if I was getting closer or further away. Then, it just stopped. I waited for a bit, but it didn't restart. I don't know where or what it was, but there was a part of me that didn't want to find out. I very quickly exited the underground. Despite that strange event, I went home and smelted all my goodies. Day 22, I decided it was high time to actually get a building down. I decided to start with a chicken coop since it was relatively small, but it was going to be very useful. I pillared up high to get a good lay of the land. In my head, I marked out where I wanted a house, a stable, a greenhouse, and the coop. I looked up a handy-dandy tutorial by Fresh Joy, and by the end of the day, the coop was mostly finished. Day 23 came along and I went to go get my chickens, only to be blown up by a creeper. Not once, but twice. The second creeper took out most of my sand storage and I was completely gutted. I decided I had had enough, and this was my own fault. It was time to build a storehouse. But first I did have to move the chickens into their new house. I was pretty proud of the new coop, so I knew that I'd be able to take on the storehouse easy peasy. I only really managed to get the pillars down before nightfall, and on day 24 I went out to gather some more wood. Day 25 I actually finished the shed building, and I was also visited by my first wandering trader. Upon seeing his prices, I quickly dispatched of him and nicked his leads. The rest of that day, as well as the entire day 26, I moved and sorted all my items into the new building, sure that they would be safe from creepers for now. Day 27, I wanted to get some cows, but first I needed to make a pasture. I made a large square behind the chicken coop and grabbed the nearby cows to populate it. I think one of them may have been the cow who witnessed me cooking steak, so I can't imagine what this guy was thinking following me in here. With my farm slowly growing, I had to start thinking about my house. Sand and gravel had been acquired, but I was missing white dye. I would need a heck of a lot of bones to pull this off, so I grabbed Rocky from his sad little pen. I really needed to make a stable soon, but for right now, I had a mission. We rode over to the village in the valley that I had spotted earlier, and I made sure to put Rocky in a nice crowded pen. I feel like he wasn't too thrilled at being surrounded by other animals, and since I had found him alone, he was probably more of a lone wolf, but I really needed to make sure he was safe. I waited for nightfall and started slaying. By the time the sun rose, I had a whopping 9 bones, and I realized this was a very inefficient method of bone collecting. Day 28 got me excited because I saw my first Enderman. I really needed to kill one because the swem mod had a crafting recipe for blaze rods, and that required an ender pearl. This would save me from having to go to the Nether and kill a blaze, which ordinarily would be quite a feat. But he teleported away before I could even get my bearings, and I was unable to find him again at all. I did find this really cool sunken house though. I can imagine if I did it all up with vines and mushrooms, it would be a really atmospheric place. I wasn't going to do that though. I took Rocky home, did some farm chores, and set out in search of more Endermen. I really wanted to turn Rocky into a swem horse soon, and I needed 2 ender pearls to do it. I was in awe of this ocean biome lake that was directly behind my camp. Having it surrounded with the overgrowth made it feel like a secret garden of sorts. I was super lucky and found not just 1, but 2 endermen in a cave. I felt kind of bad because these guys were just minding their business, but horsies took priority, I'm afraid. I used the roof method to stop them from being able to hit me and got my 2 ender pearls. Day 29 was an important day. I crafted a blaze rod and made my first potion. It was a Cancerite potion, and it would turn Rocky into a fully formed swem horse. I was a little nervous because in 1.18.2, swem horses needed to eat and drink, and I wasn't totally sure if I had the facilities for that yet. Looking back, I didn't even have a stable for him, so I probably should have waited, but I gave him the potion and he changed! He did have a random coat on him, and I needed lapis and redstone to change the color. Now, at the time, I did think he was bugged, but what I didn't know was that he needed to be retamed before I could do anything with him. At the time, I just panicked and put him in this horrible makeshift pen. I then looked up how to make tack for him since the vanilla saddles didn't work, and it turns out I needed a bunch of kelp. Day 30, I went out to the ocean and harvested a bunch of kelp. Came home, dried it, and made some refined leather. I needed this to make the tack. I also needed wool, so I lured some local sheep into the cow pasture to breed them. Day 31, I finally realized I needed to tame Rocky again in his new form, and I can't lie, having him in the tiny pen with me jumping on his back until he accepted it made me feel really icky. Like, I did not feel like this was humane. I felt like that general guy in Spirit Stallion the Cimarron trying to break the horses. Anyway, once that was over with, I made a few pieces of tack, but I required more wool, so I went out back to the overgrowth to find some wild sheep. It was back here that I saw an iguana for the first time. In fact, this was the only mob I had seen so far from the mod Alex's Mobs, and I wondered where all the other animals were. I will spoil that I did not see anything else spawn from that mod the entire playthrough. I ended up sleeping in the brush and continuing my search for wool on day 32. I was finally able to craft a full set for Rocky, and I got to ride him for the first time. I love the animations from this mod so much and just had a great time riding around for a bit. The horses are amazing at covering a lot of ground quickly, and I was sure this was going to help me out in the long run, as well as having a great companion. I can't say Rocky had as much fun as I did, but I decided to try and make it up to him by getting his coat back. Unfortunately though, I did run out of lapis before I got to a suitable coat, so he was stuck as a chestnut pinto for a little bit. When I woke up on day 33, Rocky was munching at my crops, so I figured it was best to make him a stable. I cleared the land and set down an outline with diorite. The stable didn't take me too long, but I knew I wanted at least 3, so while the first one was done and down, I wanted room to expand at some point. I made sure Rocky had a bucket and also managed to get a coat that roughly suited his original look. It wasn't perfect, but it was as close as I was going to get. Day 34 was when I started on my big farm. I knew I needed a lot of crops to feed Rocky in his new form, so I was going to go all out with it. First, I made a plow, and while I would have loved to have Rocky help me by pulling the plow, swem horses could no longer attach to carts in 18.2. I cleared lots of lands by the back of my camp so that I would have enough space, and that took most of the day. I also tried to feed Rocky some vanilla hay, but he couldn't eat it, which was a real shame. Day 35, I had so much fun running around with the plow and tilling all the land behind me. All you had to do was equip it with 3 hoes, put the plow arm down, and then move wherever you wanted. It definitely made what would have been a really tedious task into something I enjoyed. I started thinking about maybe getting a donkey so that I could have something pull a cart or plow with me in the future. Day 36, I managed to whack down all my seeds. They were a mix of wheat, alfalfa, oats, and timothy hay. I have to admit, I take so much joy in the farmer role. It speaks to me far more than miner or lumberjack or even builder. After a hard day's work, I make sure to top up Rocky's water in his stall. It took me 37 days to have my first forgot to press record incident, so I am impressed I held out so long. Luckily, I didn't do much other than ride Rocky across the river and into the forest, where I tied him up by a lake and started gathering wood. I slept over there to roll on to day 38. Now, I have a confession to make. Day 37 also included me accidentally committing a crime so heinous I am reluctant to even mention it. Remember the bee we saw on day 3? Well, I found his hive and his partner bee, and instead of Googling it, like I should have, I assumed that I had to place a campfire under the hive and break it, not knowing that I needed silk touch for it to actually drop. I had managed to make 2 bees homeless, and without the honeycomb to make an artificial hive, they were left to fend for themselves. I felt absolutely terrible, but for right now there wasn't anything I could do for them, so I continued gathering my wood. Meanwhile, I fed Rocky any apples I found, and he happily munched on grass and drank the lake water. At the end of the day, we headed home, and I had a really pleasant ride back. The swem horses were big, so they moved pretty fast. My favourite thing though was that they could actually swim, unlike vanilla horses where they would just sink. Rocky and I hadn't had much time to bond, so this was a really nice day to have spent together. Day 39 was when I realised how cruel it was to keep Rocky in his stall all the time, so it was time to make a paddock. I got to work clearing some land and setting down the fences. This rolled over onto day 40 when it was finally done, but I realised since this was a self-turnout paddock, the other 2 stables needed to be built too, or Rocky could just walk away, so I started on them as well. Day 41, I almost finished the stables apart from the roof, but when I woke up on day 42, I realized I had done a botched job on the 3rd stable roof, so I did have to redo that. Then I brushed Rocky, who was enjoying his new paddock, did some farm chores, and crafted a knife. Day 43 and 44 were dedicated to doing a huge harvest of my crops. It was a bit of a nightmare to replant all the seeds by hand because there was just so much land and so many seeds. If only I had remembered to include a mod that added a mob who did auto farming for you and was also really adorable. Day 45, I set up a wall around the farm, not because I really had anything to defend against, more that I wanted it to look aesthetically pleasing. I had a routine with Rocky now where every day I made sure to fill his water, turn him out, and to give him a brush. I had made this hay ball feeder, but it wasn't actually functional, and I had also made a slow feeder that I put in his stable, but I didn't yet have anything to put inside of it. Once that was done, I popped out in the late evening to look for some pumpkins, but I wasn't successful. Day 46, I decided I wanted to take Rocky out on an adventure, and to my frustration, I had forgotten to press record that day. Again. Not too much happened, but the trip to the desert biome that would usually take most of the day in the boat only took me till the afternoon. I found a desert temple and looted it, finding some XP potions for Rocky. On day 47, I woke up in my makeshift camp just outside of the temple. I decided to give Rocky the potions I'd found the day before, and that gave us some speed XP, health XP, and some more bonding. I was already a little over encumbered, so I thought I could offload some items into Rocky's saddlebag, but then I found swem saddlebags have designated slots, which is a really cute idea, but it meant I had no real storage. I travelled a little further into the desert where I found a lovely river cutting through the sand. I decided to let Rocky have a wander around here since he would have access to food and water. Then I collected some cacti and got to work getting the sand. While I was collecting the sand, I had a long hard think about my white dye problem. To make white dye, I needed bone meal or lily of the valley flowers. There was no way I was going to collect enough flowers to fill the quota, so I had to rely on bones. Since my night escapades only resulted in a measly 9 bones, I had only 2 options left. 1, find a skeleton spawner in the mines. This would allow me to set up a skeleton farm, which would give me plenty of bones. 2, locate a fossil. They coincidentally spawned above and below ground in deserts, but I wasn't guaranteed to find one here. I didn't know how far away the next desert biome was or how to even search for the fossil in this desert. I would keep an eye out in this desert for a fossil, but logically, looking for a skeleton spawner was probably a better bet. I slept under the stars again that night in my bedroll. Day 48, I continued my sand shoveling in the early morning and decided to head home soon after. The terrain was a piece of cake for Rocky, and we actually bonded up from tolerant to indifferent that day. One thing I had to keep an eye out for was sudden ravines. As Rocky was going so fast, we'd fall right into one if I wasn't careful. We were almost out of the desert when I spotted a hole in the sand, and I figured it was worth a peek into. Lo and behold, I had stumbled upon a fossil. I had basically struck gold. This was the last type of resource I needed for my house. I headed down ASAP, and after dispatching a few mobs, I got my hands on the fossil and started mining. This was when I realized how unsettling the sound is when you break bone blocks. I got a little bit cocky and did some mining in the cave before realizing it was dark, so I resurfaced and slept. On day 40, I bimbled around the cave for a little bit more before heading home with Rocky. On the way back, I grabbed some pumpkins and spotted my first donkey. I tamed him so that he wouldn't despawn and left a waypoint so I knew where he was. I didn't want to bring him home just yet since I had way too much on my plate already. Day 50, exactly halfway through the challenge, I had a solid plan for my house, the stables, and my overall farm. This was also the day my straw golems were born. They were so cute. I wanted to just eat them. They made the most adorable little noises and started slowly working on my field. I then crafted up all the concrete blocks I needed and found that thanks to the fossil, I had actually gotten more than enough white dye for both the house and possibly the stables too. I was a bit horrified that I only had concrete powder and I would have to wet each block to make the actual concrete, but that was a problem for another day. Day 51, I enacted phase 1 of my plan, gathering. Rocky and I headed to the forest across the river and I just went to town. I had a lot of wood products to make, like slabs and stairs, so I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed before I set down my first block. This continued on to day 52, and that evening I started phase 2, light up the area. Admittedly, I probably should have done this ages ago, but I really dislike having torches all over the place. But when I started building, I wanted to make sure I could work all through the night with minimal interruptions. Day 53, I marked out the outline of the house in cobblestone. It was a little bit hard to tell where the entrance was going to be from the video, and I needed it to face a specific way. I was glad I double checked this outline as I was a couple of blocks off the first time. Phase 3 was the most boring phase. I spent the evening of day 53 and the entirety of day 54 turning my powder into concrete blocks. I'm sure there is some better auto farming method to do this, but I found my rhythm and got everything done. The night of day 54 until day 57, I constructed like my life depended on it. I followed the tutorial to a T and it was really helpful. I won't lie, after like day 35, I was heavily doubting that I would be able to make this particular house because it required so much white dye and so much concrete, and I did consider picking a different house to build. I did want to keep a lot of the process in the video so you can see how I did this totally by hand in survival. When the outside was mostly finished, it looked stunning. I still had to do the windows and the interior, but I was well proud of myself. I then remembered that I had not seen or cared for Rocky since day 53, and I realized he was in trouble. His food and water were getting lower and I couldn't understand why. He had access to both in his field. I assumed that he was okay for the time being and did a quick trip into the mines for more gravel and diorite. That night I continued to finish the interior of my house. Day 58, I updated the stables. I wanted it to match better with my new house and for it to look a little more swanky, so I replaced the oak plank exterior walls with white concrete. The stable looks so much nicer with their upgraded walls, and I installed rubber mats on the floor of all of the stalls. Adding trapdoors to give a little more dimension and detail, I was well happy with the new look. The stables reminded me a little bit of that Littlest Pet Shop horse stable set. My mood was dampened when I checked up on Rocky only to find his food and water had deteriorated further. I just didn't know how to help him. Day 59, it rained most of the day, but I had finally smelted enough sand for the windows. I adore how the stained glass looks in this texture pack. I'd actually made my bottom floor windows bigger in my house compared to the tutorial because I am a sucker for large windows and natural light. I adored my open window view from what would later become my bedroom. Day 60, I had enough waiting to see if Rocky would get better because he just wasn't. I needed to go away mining for the day, so I crafted loads of alfalfa bales and put them in his stall, both in a freestanding stack and in his slow feeder. I made sure his water was full and shut off his access to the paddock. My theory was that he would have to eat and drink if he was in a closed-off area rather than wandering around. I was still super concerned for him and felt really bad since he was my first horse, so I didn't even know if I was doing anything right. I did head underground and was very successful, finding lots of ore and also diamonds. My favorite thing to find though was this skillet, which I think was part of the Wild Farm Craft mod. I saw it had a damage stat, so I went to go try it out on an unsuspecting zombie. Not the most effective weapon, but the clang sound did make me laugh. I spent a really long time in the caves because I wanted this to be one of the last times I went down. I didn't resurface until day 62, where I ran home to see if Rocky had improved. He had only eaten half a bale, but his meter hadn't moved even one bit. I hand-fed him 2 entire bales and then went to smelt my ores to have a brainstorm session. When the rain cleared up, I went to do some farm chores and noticed that the sheep and cow pasture was really laggy to be inside. I figured it was due to the number of entities in one chunk since the chickens were nearby as well. So it was about time I started thinking about a cow barn. I did almost blow up all my chickens with a creeper too, so that was fun. Day 63, I cleared some land and set down the foundations for the cow barn behind the sheep pasture. It still needed to match my house and the stables, so while the base was diorite, the walls were going to be concrete and the roof would be wood. I wasn't doing anything fancy with it shape-wise, it was just going to be a large rectangle, but I wanted the roof to be a bit more barn-like. So come day 64, I did it up, and I was pretty darn impressed of how I did that freestyle. I spent the night doing the interior, so I was finished by the end of the day. Day 65 was Save Rocky Day. I finally looked up on the wiki how the feeding works, and to my horror, you had to feed them every day with grain. I made a vet kit and checked Rocky for the first time, and it logged him as missing 14 meals. That certainly explained why he was in such a state. I got round to actually naming him with a name tag and made a grain feeder. Then I crafted a bunch of sweet feeds to put in the new feeder and set it all up in his stall. One thing that was a complete pain to do was to fill up his water bucket since it held 3 buckets worth of water and I had to keep going back and forth to do it. Day 66, I was desperate to take Rocky on an adventure, but I had jumped the gun and he was still too sick to go. This was a real shame, but I was in need of spruce logs, so I decided to just go anyway. Here is me admiring my barn from the boat on my way out. I figured that I could go and pick up the donkey on my way out, and he could accompany me on the journey. Now, I know it says Jack on his GUI panel because that's the breed of donkey he is, but the name just sort of stuck, so I went along with calling him Jack. The weather was pretty terrible, so I decided to put him in the boat and make a pit stop at Rocky's village for the night. Day 67, I went further than I had ever gone before. I wanted to grab lots of flowers because my dream of having a greenhouse populated by bees was very much still alive, and I looted another village on my way. Day 68, I made the choice to continue looking for a spruce forest rather than turning back. Jack and I covered some good distance and I was having fun collecting loads and loads of flowers as we went. I was super happy when we found a plains biome covered in sunflowers. I watched the sunset here and it was pretty dreamy. On the morning of day 69, we came across this adorable mare and foal. They seemed to be by themselves in the sunflower plains and I wanted to just leave them be. Jack and I pressed on, and once again I found the most precious little area filled with flowers and sheep. I went about collecting all the flowers when I suddenly noticed there were bees here. I did feel bad for nicking all their flowers, but this was also an amazing opportunity. If I harvested the honeycomb, I could finally craft an artificial hive and rescue the 2 homeless bees. I made sure to do it right this time and successfully scored 6 honeycomb. As lovely as it was here, it was time to press on, and as we got up the hill, we were greeted with a spectacular sight. Rolling fields with huge mountains in the back. It was almost too perfect. Using my Optifine zoom, I honed in on the horizon, spotting lava, a broken portal, and a village. I opted to go towards the broken portal for 2 reasons. 1, I could collect the portally blocks, and 2, I could get a better view from up the mountain. There wasn't anything really noteworthy here, but I did have a big storage issue. I didn't have space for anything in my inventory or my backpack, and I wanted to make a chest to put on Jack so he could carry some things, but I didn't have any wood. I chose to climb the mountain, and we were so lucky in finding a village at the top, but first I was in awe of this extreme valley. It was almost like a crater. If I had been in creative, I would have loved to build something here. I just looted the village and slept. For day 70, I put in my notes dummy dum dum forgot to record, so clearly I wasn't too happy at the time. From what I remember, I got some wood from the village, so I was able to outfit Jack with a chest, and I used the village church as a vantage point. I was thrilled when I spotted a spruce forest and made my way all the way over. When I got to the edge of the forest, I slept again. Day 71 was spent gathering wood and making sure I had saplings to replant so I wouldn't have to come so far whenever I needed spruce. I stumbled upon a village that was just so beautiful, and after I ransacked it, I made sure to pick up some sweet berries. Jack and I made our way home, and by day 72 we were back at the farm. I introduced Rocky and Jack, and while they didn't seem too keen on each other, I just put it down to Rocky feeling a bit unwell. He was improving, but still wasn't 100%. I made him an armored pasture blanket to keep him safe and warm when he chose to be outside. I also made lots of bales to feed him with and a fridge to put in what would be my kitchen. Day 73, I tended to Rocky by brushing, feeding, and making sure his water bucket was full. Then I set out to the mesa biome that was located by the desert so that I could get terracotta, a key crafting ingredient for my kitchen decor. Day 74, I mined up the blocks I needed and headed home with my bounty. I'd been in the practice of taking the boat since the route was connected by a long river, so it was pretty convenient. That night, I made my counters and opted for light blue dye since I wanted the kitchen to feel bright but not too colourful. I also checked up on Rocky, who was sleeping, and look how cute he is! Oh my goodness! It was at this moment I realised I would die for this horse. I filled up his feeder and checked up on Jack, who had wandered to the back of the paddock and was just minding his own business. In the early hours of day 75, I started putting together my kitchen. I was very happy with my colour choice, and I just potted around checking in on Rocky and decorating my downstairs kitchen and living room. This rolled into day 76, where I continued my decorating, using candle lanterns to light up some areas and flowers to make places look more colourful. Day 78, I started on decorating the upstairs, which proved slightly more difficult than I had anticipated. So that evening, I took a break and decided to have a crack at properly decorating the cow barn so that I could finally move the cows in. See what I did there? I did a test run of 2 types of gates. One was a double wooden gate that was quite low, and the other was a grey metal pasture gate that was meant for the swem horses. I found I liked the metal gate more as it gave off more of a farm vibe than a cottagecore vibe. The sun started to rise, signifying it was now day 79. I continued decking out the barn using iron bars as railings in the loft, friendly bars on windows, and placing cauldrons as water troughs for the cows. In the dead of night, I picked out 4 cows to be milk cows and 2 to be meat bred. The meat cows would have a bigger stall at the back of the barn to give me space to breed them, and I hoped to eventually give the milk cows names. That night, I culled the remaining cows and counted up my sheep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. In the morning, I headed into my new kitchen to grill some steaks before heading to the stables to bring Rocky inside for his breakfast. I was confused when I found some of the pond had iced over, since we never got snow or ice here, and it was then I realized that the armor pasture blanket was giving Rocky the power of Frostwalker, essentially rendering him unable to drink from the pond. Despite the setback, I brought him inside and he had a big drink from his bucket. The new rule was he wasn't allowed to be turned out until he had at least eaten his grain, so I left him in the stall and went about doing farm chores, mostly breeding sheep, collecting eggs, and repairing the fence after a creeper had damaged it. Come evening, it was time for me to do something I'd been putting off for a little while. The house was now fully built and there was no reason to sleep in my makeshift tent that I set up all the way back on day 4. I made myself a lovely pink bed, went upstairs and put it down. With my respawn point now set, there was only one thing left to do, and that was to tear down my camp. It was a bittersweet moment that was the mark of progress I had made in all those days, but I was still grateful for my humble beginnings. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time. Day 80, I woke up to sunlight streaming in through my window. It was a beautiful moment to have. Today was spring cleaning and more decorating. I removed the makeshift chests I had placed down for constructing my house, sorted my inventory, and started making some more decorational blocks for my bedroom. I wasn't too keen on my acacia desk, so I would have to fix that soon, and I settled on a single bed pushed up against the back window instead of a double off to the side. While I was on my way back to the storehouse, I popped in to see Rocky and top up his food and water. Then I crafted a boatload of different furniture and headed upstairs to tackle my bedroom once again. I used some cabinets as headboards, then switched out the acacia desk for an oak wood one. I attempted to make a cabinet unit out of cabinets, trapdoors, slabs, and a bookshelf. I switched the stone desk chair with an oak one, and in the night I continued my crafting until day 81. I made some custom fairy lights out of pink and white hearts, which I hung up over my bed, and soon I realized that with all the crafting, I was in dire need of better storage. This required me to pull out every single item and put it in a temporary chest outside the storehouse, extend the storehouse out, remove all the chests, place in storage crates, then place in barrels. I then had to put all the items into the corresponding container, and I combined this with crafting more decor items as I went. This took a major amount of time, so it wasn't until the morning of day 83 that everything was complete. Now everything had a designated spot and the storehouse was far more organized than before. I even had made this automatic smelter to make the job of smelting ores more convenient. It wasn't the most pro design, but it worked. I now had a workbench area for all of my tools and my crafting. This project was the second to most tedious, only after making concrete out of concrete powder, because I had so many blocks and items to move out and back into the storehouse, but it was finally complete. I was also excited to give you a full tour of the house since I hadn't done a proper one yet. When you enter the house, you are greeted by the kitchen, where I had set up a stew pot which unlocked a bunch of new recipes. I had a fridge where I kept some foods, and a freezer that I had no idea how to use, so I just put some raw meat inside. I also had so many random plants and veggies, so I put them all in my kitchen drawers. I had a working sink with an amazing window view. Then into the living room, I had some comfy pink sofas, and I was just really chuffed at how I had successfully used the space for furniture and shelving. My upstairs hallway was probably the saddest part of the house since I really had nothing in it apart from some empty shelves, but I had no clue what to put in there yet. My balcony was equally as sad, but I just hadn't gotten around to doing it up at that point. My bedroom, however, I was super happy with. My bed had a headboard and nightstands, accompanied with fairy lights and a picture frame and some plant pots. I had gone all out on my cabinet, placing paintings and lights and trophies from the swem mod, so I finally had a use for all the gold that was just lying around. I had this wardrobe where I put my armor for safekeeping. My desk was pretty minimal, but I really liked it. It had the best view in the house, and I could actually sit on the chair, which was a nice touch. I was really proud of my house. It had come such a long way from concept to construction to finish. I had also decorated the back of the house with flowers for a pop of color. However, spending so much time in the house, I had realized that the chicken coop across the lake had begun to bother me. The ugly wooden shack blocked my gorgeous white barn and just made the area a little bit unsightly, so I started to plan where I could move it. Day 83 was also a momentous day, as Rocky was finally back to full health after his rigorous routine and feeding schedule. Today was a day that felt like all the pieces were finally falling into place. To celebrate, I used my swanky new storehouse to craft some horsey items. I finally made a faucet and a block of water to supply it. I placed it above Rocky's bucket, so never again would I have to run back and forth filling it by hand. I also made a light blue slow feeder. In the evening, I tried out lamppost designs, but I was unsatisfied with the look, so instead I opted to spend the night placing in paths. I decided to use a mix of stone paths from Mr. Crayfish's furniture mod, diorite, cobblestone, and grass paths. Day 84, I continued pathing all the way up to the house and connected it to the farm. When I was done, I made myself a little dock. It wasn't anything grand, and I did want to keep things more natural, but I made this little cove where I could leave the boats. Before I went to bed, I had another crack at lamppost designing, but to no avail. Day 85, I woke up in the house and admired my handiwork on the way out. The plan was originally to put my head down and design a lamppost, but I ended up being really distracted in trying to make a fountain most of the day. It came out terribly, so I scrapped that idea and finally got on with making the lampposts. I settled on the design of one diorite block, a diorite wall, 2 fences, a slab, a trapdoor, and a lantern. I also decided it was time to rename the waypoint from camp to home, because it was no longer just a makeshift setup. Happy with that, I spent most of the night setting up my new lamppost, and I made a sweet feed bin for Rocky. In the early hours of day 86, I thought it was time to remove my lonely campfire, but I chose to honor it by setting up 2 large posts with campfires on the top, with hopes that these would bring me home the same way the original campfire did. I had enough of building for now, so I wanted to take Rocky out for a ride today, but it started raining out of nowhere. I really should have stayed home, but I didn't feel like doing anything else, and I didn't want to sit around and waste an entire day, so I tacked up Rocky and got on the road. The downside of rain meant aggressive mobs still spawned on the surface, and my hopes were that we could just outrun them since Rocky was so fast. It had been such a long time since I'd been in the saddle, and I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. The section we were riding in now, I had secretly wanted to turn into an actual track for me and Rocky to train on, but I probably didn't have enough time since I still wanted an orchard and a greenhouse. Rocky was in tip-top shape again, which was great, so I took him towards the village in the valley, hoping to go even further. To my surprise, we hit a bamboo forest, and as soon as I saw this, all I wanted for today was to see a panda. I left Rocky behind while I went to collect some bamboo, and I heard a little chirpy whistle of a parrot. I turned around and found this poor guy sheltering under a bush. He was such a pretty color, and I wanted to take him home with me, so I broke all the grass and fed him any seeds I got. Eventually, I tamed him, and he got onto my shoulder, and look how cute he is! The first name that popped into my head was Bebo, so that's what I called him. Things got a bit dicey when zombies started coming at me, but I fought my way out with Bebo and got back to Rocky. My favorite thing was riding Rocky with Bebo on my shoulder. We looked like an awesome group. It was a bit stressful to get home as mobs kept charging us, and Rocky would pick the worst time to buck. But we made it home safe and sound, and while I wouldn't try going out in the rain again, I was glad I did this time since I had a new friend in the house. Rocky and I improved our relationship from indifferent to accepting, which was also nice. I untacked Rocky and got him ready for bed while Bebo hung out in his stall. When I was finished, I took him inside and made a little hanging cage out of iron chains, scaffolding, and an oak slab. It was a bit of a nightmare trying to get Bebo to sit inside, but once I was finished, he looked very happy in his new home. Before bed, I grabbed 2 name tags, one for Bebo and one for Jack, who had been hanging out at the back of the paddock. They both officially got named, and on my way back, I checked in on Rocky, who was lying down being all cute in his stall. Day 87, I used a new wheelbarrow to put all of Rocky's poop in, brought Jack up from the back of the paddock so they could hang out, decorated the cow barn with hay and crates, and started clearing some land for the coop relocation. In the evening, I made a measuring tool and set up some jumps in the paddock, which I took Rocky over. We weren't very good, and I was still using the Western Adventure set, so I went and crafted a black English set ready for tomorrow. Day 88, I set up some more jumps and got Rocky tacked up in his new gear. I was having a blast, and while we couldn't go that high yet, with some practice I'm sure we would have improved. I originally didn't want to build an arena, but this certainly had me considering one. Then we were rudely interrupted by a trader and his llamas. I practically spent all day jumping, and in the late afternoon I wanted to take Rocky out for a gallop. This also had me wishing I had an actual track to take him out on, but he did amazingly anyway. We also leveled up his speed that day. After the refreshing few days of horsing around, I decided to move the coop on day 89. I just needed it to be slightly more out of the way so as to complement the view of the barn rather than obstruct it. As I removed the coop, I was reminded that every step we take is important, even if we tear down that step to build something better later on. The coop was the first proper building I made, and it served its purpose. Now I was going to make something even lovelier in its place. It was the dead of night when I finally finished, and I had replaced the oak walls for white concrete to match my other builds. Day 90, with only 10 days left, I had to optimize my every move. I added some detailing to the chicken coop and decorated the exterior of the barn to maximize aestheticness. In the night, I started to path the area and make a little protruding dock. Day 91, I looked out my window and was satisfied with my new view of the barn and the coop. I then grabbed Jack and hitched him to the wagon. There was absolutely no reason for this other than I wanted a companion nearby while I cleared the area that was soon to be the orchard. I mapped out where all the trees would go and turned Jack out to the paddock in the night. Day 92, I planted the beginnings of my orchard. I opted for apple trees for 3 reasons. 1, I could feed the apples to Rocky. 2, I could make apple cider, and 3, they just looked really nice. In the night, I finally connected the stables area to the coop and barn via a path, and in the early morning to the afternoon on day 93, I set up lamps along this new path. I also marked out a new farm area with oak slabs, partly because I had a space to fill, and partly because I wanted easy access to the wheat for all the animals over this way. Day 94, with less than a week to go, I plucked up the courage to build a bridge over the river, connecting us to the forest. I was dreading this because of how wide the river was, and I was just really worried I would build an eyesore when I had done so well so far. I winged it, and well, it didn't turn out terrible. It wasn't my best work for sure, and it certainly wasn't symmetrical, but hey ho, at least it was done. Day 95, it was back in the orchard. I brought Rocky over to let him have a wander about, and I made a few baskets, mostly for decoration rather than storage. I also dyed Rocky's head color because it was originally red, but I had decided since he had lovely green eyes that lime was more his color. Day 96 was Adventure Day. I took Rocky out for a ride to go back to the bamboo forest to see what was beyond it. And we found a panda. This creature is by far the most useless mob in Minecraft, but by gosh is it cute. I fed him some bamboo, and after he munched on that, I decided to just leave him alone. We ventured on and came across a beach where I saw my first turtles. Using my Optifine zoom, I spotted a forest mansion across the water, as well as some kind of sunken ruin. Emboldened, I made a boat and headed over to the ruin, hoping for a quick loot. only to sink my boat and be cornered by a trident-wielding drowned. He almost destroyed me, and I was starting to think I was a goner. By some luck and a lot of running, I made it to an island where I crafted a new boat and skedaddled out of there. That was certainly a dose of reality for me, and I headed home to safety with Rocky. With only 3 days left, I had one final mission: bees. I quickly set up my new farm and harvested my apples before grabbing Rocky and heading out. The last time I had seen them was by the village in the valley, but that was ages ago and they could be anywhere by now. I decided to start looking there and head towards the birch forest, as another hive was likely to have spawned there. I accidentally rode Rocky and I into some hemlock and we both took a bit of damage. In all honesty, I did not have high hopes for finding them, but to my shock, I spotted one hovering above the water. I panicked because bees take damage from water, so I had Rocky swim us over there so I could grab him with my lead. I would have stayed to look for the second bee, but it was getting dark and we would be slower getting back because of the bee, and I didn't want to risk any of us. We successfully returned and I dashed into the house to put the bee in temporarily, and I realized I had the birds and the bees in my house. I made him a new hive, and while I wanted to have a greenhouse with bees, he could just stay in the orchard for now. I kept an eye on him for a while, making sure he wouldn't fly off, and he eventually went into his new house. Rocky was exhausted and lay down in his stall as soon as he was untacked. Day 98, I made the tough call to stay home. I really wanted to go and get the second bee, but it was storming, and the last time I went out in the rain, the mobs gave me so much grief about it. Plus, the bees would probably stay in their hive today, so I wouldn't be able to bring it home without breaking their house. Instead, I finished up the orchard and made sure Rocky was ready for tomorrow. Day 99 was the last day I could really do anything, so I had to make sure I got the bee today. I got Rocky ready to roll. Wait, that's a great show name for him. Rock and roll. Anyway, I got him tacked up and we headed to the birch forest to find the bee. It wasn't hovering above the water, so I had to go further in and hope I could locate the hive. I spotted one bimbling around above the tree line, and as I went to go get it, I bumped into another one. There must have been 2 here already, and the 2 I made homeless traveled over here to house share. That meant that there was a total 3 bees in this forest, but I only had 2 leads. I went to go grab a flower to tempt the last one to follow when suddenly my game crashed. Error code 1. After a quick Google, I confirmed this was due to one of the mods, but I didn't think anything of it. When I loaded back into the game, I saw the day had reset, which was pretty frustrating, but it gave me the opportunity to bring 3 leads instead of 2. I ran to the stables to get Rocky, and he wasn't there. Rocky wasn't here. He wasn't in the paddock either, so I assumed he had been left at the forest for some reason. Not wanting to waste any time, I grabbed Jack and set out for the forest. He was a lot slower than Rocky, so it did take some time to get there. To my horror, Rocky wasn't where I had originally dismounted before the crash, but he might have just wandered off. I searched and searched and searched, pillaring up to try and see him through the trees. Rocky wasn't anywhere. I was getting really upset. I couldn't find him, and as night started to fall, it sank in that the crash may have erased him from my game. I couldn't understand why. I wasn't even sitting on him when the crash happened, unless Swem itself had caused the crash. Soon it was dark, and I had no choice but to abandon search, and with it, abandoning my hope of finding Rocky. I won't lie, I was devastated. This horse had been with me since day 14, and while we had our ups and downs, he was the whole reason I was doing this challenge. I had managed to lose my only horse on day 99. I put Jack back in the paddock by himself and felt so defeated. There was just no other option than to just end day 99. With day 100 upon us, I put on my original shaders and the world was vibrant and beautiful. I took the time to enjoy my bedroom and look out of my window at my farm. I had achieved so much in 100 days, and I was so proud of what this little campsite had become. I love the theme of the place, and even though it was a right pain to get all the concrete, it was certainly worth it. I walked downstairs and said a final good morning to Bebo, enjoying the view from my kitchen window once again. I walked around my farm, admiring the colours and the lights. Then I went over to say hi to Jack. He was a hardy donkey that never let me down, and I'm sure he missed Rocky as much as I did, but he would be just fine hanging out in the paddock as usual. I said hi to the bale golems and admired my orchard and animal farm. There was so much I still wanted to do and build, from a greenhouse to an arena to more decorating. But before I finished my 100 days, there was one more thing I wanted to do.
Back on day 101. I left off at Rocky's grave, so it was time to say my goodbyes to him, grab my stuff and go home. As much as the last 100 days had a really sad ending after we lost him, this was my chance to do things differently and to do them right. I decided I would leave no ends untied, and today I would go get those blasted bees. As soon as I got home, I decided my backpack was long overdue for an upgrade. Not only did I improve it all the way to the gold level, but I also dyed it pink to feel a bit more like my style. The day had started to get away from me, so I quickly went into the paddock where I found Jack in his usual spot right at the back. Since I had no horse, he would have to accompany me to go and get the bees. We set off, but only made it to the village in the valley by sundown, so I decided to whip out my bedroll and sleep through the night. Day 102, we continued on, but shortly after, I spotted the most gorgeous horse. He was a dark bay with socks and looked so much like my horse Jericho. I mean, I wasn't planning on getting a horse so soon, but since he was here, I quickly tamed him to make sure he wouldn't despawn and tied him up so he couldn't wander too far. Despite the minor distraction, I continued into what I had nicknamed the Cursed Forest. It wasn't really cursed, but it did feel like it to me. I didn't want to hang around, so I found the equally cursed bees and skedaddled out of there. On my way back, I wanted to kill two metaphorical birds with one stone by bringing Jericho back with me. Yes, I've already decided that that is his name. Jericho was slightly faster than Jack, so I decided to lead the bees and the donkey and jumped on my new steed. It was a bit of a struggle since the bees kept getting caught on things, which was so annoying, but we did eventually make it back. I tried to coax them into the new hive like I'd done before, but they just weren't having it. So I sort of gave up and decided if they wanted to stay, then they would. I led Jack and Jericho back to my stables where I assigned Jericho a stall next to Rocky's old one. Honestly, I could have waited to turn him into a swem horse, but realistically, I just didn't see the point. We could begin training and bonding from day 2, and I was sure that this would come in handy to have an animal which could move that fast. I grabbed one of the 2 remaining Cantazarite potions, as well as some lapis, to change his coat once he was transformed. The potion worked, and it turned him into a big, beautiful horse. I tamed him and switched out his coat for one that looked very similar to his original. I then made sure to feed him and water him properly, since I was now well versed in how to care for a swem horse. I made sure to brush him and left him inside to get used to his new home. I won't lie, I was both excited and nervous to have a swem horse again. I did end up checking on the bees in the night and yeah, they were a bit broken. They had not gone into the hive like they should have and were just floating above my orchard. I did try to coax one in, but it was having none of it.
I gave up and went into my house for the first time to say hello to my beautiful bird Bebo, who I had missed. Day 103, I did my morning routine with Jericho, making sure he was happy and fed before turning him out into the paddock. He didn't need an introduction to Jack, who was also in there, so I left him to explore on his own time. The bees were still royally broken, so I turned my attention to my first project, which was to build an enchanting room. I wanted to beat the Ender Dragon near day 300, and I would have no chance if my gear wasn't enchanted, plus it had the potential to really help me out in future projects. I didn't want to build a separate building, so I started carving out a basement under my house. It was pretty boring work, and I ended up finding a granite vein, which I felt like I had to mine since so many of my builds included the block. Plus, I wanted all the walls in my basement to be granite. This rolled us on to day 104 when I started putting oak planks down for the floors and replacing the walls with granite. When I resurfaced, it was raining, and even though Jericho was smart enough to take shelter in his stall, the bees lacked survival instincts and were hovering in the sky still. I made sure Jericho ate, drank, and was brushed before I did a sugarcane harvest to make paper for the books I needed to make the enchanting room. I didn't have quite enough yet, so I did some remodeling on the pond so that 100% of its banks were used in growing sugarcane. I also finally got around to stomping down the remainder of the farm that I'd removed in the last 100 days. I slapped down some bookshelves to power the enchanting table, and then I smartly crafted myself a clock so I could keep track of time more easily, as well as making an adorable purple moonlight, which I then placed in a nook in the basement. Day 105, I needed to go and get some obsidian to actually craft the enchanting table. Luckily, just across the river in the forest, there was a lava lake, which, if you remember, I battled with the fires it produced when I first landed here. I threw down a bucket of water, turning it into obsidian, and began mining it with my diamond pick. Then, the music began to haunt me again. This time though, it was a much less scary experience because I knew what was causing it. In my last 100 days, commenter EnderS5 explained that the backpacks mod I was using had a jukebox upgrade, and since mobs could also wear them, sometimes they would spawn in playing music. That was what I was hearing underground that day. I am so glad we solved that mystery because by gosh was that a creepy experience. I smacked up the skeleton wearing the backpack and it actually dropped it, so now I had a jukebox upgrade and a free disc. I continued chipping away at the obsidian and thought while I was there I may as well construct a nether portal. I hadn't been there yet, so it was long overdue for exploration and collection. Once I had a rough outline, I headed back over to craft the enchanting table, as well as treat myself to a diamond sword and full diamond armor. I then took the table for a spin by enchanting my pickaxe, and I got Unbreaking 3 and Efficiency 4. I placed down the backpack I got from the skeleton earlier to use as pretty storage in my enchanting room. To end the night, I crafted Jericho a red halter, and just as I went to give it to him, I found a zombie villager had spawned in his stall. This was amazing because I could have a trading villager at my house and all I needed to do was to cure him. To cure a zombie villager, you need a golden apple and a splash potion of weakness. Luckily, I had everything I needed for the golden apple, but I only had red mushrooms when I needed brown to brew the potion. I decided I would need to go out and explore at some point to get my ingredients. Just before the day was up, I checked on the bees and yep, they're still broken. Day 106, I sort of got swept up in this idea I had for the villager. I wanted to put him in a little market stall right outside my storage shed, so I started building that. I wanted to go for a red and white checked roof to give the place a pop of color and really make it look like a cute little market stall. I tried to keep with the palette theme of my other builds, but also give it a sort of makeshift pop-up feel. I needed a lot of red and white wool for that, so I headed over to the crowded sheep pen to shear them. I managed to finish the stall bar a few red wool blocks on the roof, but I soon realized my mistake when I entered Jericho's stable to find him sleeping peacefully with no zombie villager. Yeah, I'd forgotten I needed to name tag him to stop him from despawning. Sad. I tried to cheer myself up by putting a cool pink and white horseshoe banner on my shield, but the banner looked great until I actually applied it to my shield where it lost the image of the horseshoe. Damn, that's 2-0 to life today. It was now day 107, 1 week into the challenge. I thought it was time I went into the Nether to see what all the fuss was about and maybe collect a few cool blocks. It was about midday when I corrected my poorly built portal and lit it. Ever since the Nether was updated, it is such a cool place to explore. It's got such a unique atmosphere and it is pretty dangerous, so I knew I had to be careful. The last thing I wanted was for my newly made diamond armor to burn in lava. As I was wandering around, I did find some brown mushrooms, which meant I could brew a potion of weakness for the zombie villager I didn't have. I did also chop down some crimson trees and harvested the shroomlights too. Not much happened apart from this really scary looking ghast passing by, but he didn't bother me. Since I was being so careful, I managed to explore a decent amount before heading back to the overworld. When I arrived, it was the morning of day 108. I went home and unpacked my bounty and took care of Jericho. By this point, I wanted to do some mining to top up my resources before starting any projects. I had a few in mind that I wanted to do, such as a greenhouse, an arena, and a racetrack, but I didn't want to half do a project before running out of iron for tools. Just as I was heading to my usual cave by the farm, I heard the cutest music. It reminded me of Animal Crossing or Nintendogs, and I just really wanted the CD. As you've probably already guessed, there is a mob nearby with a backpack on. The hard part is actually finding it, since it must be underground. I mined around, doing my best to try and locate the sound. I did end up uncovering a tiny crack where a few mobs had wedged themselves. It was just my luck that the backpack was on a creeper who blew himself up before I had a chance to kill him, meaning the backpack and disc did not drop. Soon, I started mining straight down to look for a cave. Yeah, I'm a Minecraft pro. Everyone knows digging straight down is ultra safe. I ended up uncovering a zombie spawner. Now, remember this bit, it is relevant later. I secured the spawner and started my cave exploration. It was pretty darn successful. I ended up with a decent collection of diamonds, ores, and a few name tags too. I was down there for so long that when I resurfaced, it was actually day 110. Feeling pretty good about my haul, I decided that the hole left in my heart by that zombie villager was going to be forcibly filled by kidnapping someone from the village in the valley. I wanted to take Jericho with me since he was quicker than I was on foot, and it was about time I got a ride in. This was Jericho's first outing since his change, and I cannot tell you how great it felt to be riding a swem horse again. Admittedly, he was a lot slower and more stubborn than Rocky was, but we would start bonding and that's all that mattered. I thoroughly enjoyed the canter through the meadow at sunset, but of course that meant that I had to sleep before I could begin my abduction. Day 111, I enacted my plan. What was that plan, you may ask? Well, it's quite simple. I didn't really have one. First, I was wandering around trying to find one villager who would trade with me, but I just kept getting rejected, which really hurt my feelings. I did find this rabbit guy who had a pretty good trade of 1 emerald for 22 carrots. Since villagers can't be led, I thought I'd just chuck him in a boat and be on my merry way. I quickly found that, shockingly, boats aren't good on land. Not only are they painfully slow, but they cannot go up any incline whatsoever, so you must have a flat plane to go over or the boat gets stuck. It couldn't even get over the 2 pixel difference between normal grass and the grass path. I finally managed to get us onto a relatively flat piece of grass, but now I had to basically build a super ugly dirt highway all the way from here to my house. One thing I really liked about where I lived was the natural topography, and I really didn't want to terraform it or leave ugly 1-block floating paths everywhere. It pained me every block I placed down, and eventually I just gave up because I was making practically no progress and it was getting pretty late. Looking back, I definitely could have broken the boat to free the villager, but I just rode Jericho home instead. Day 112 was slightly less frustrating, but equally mundane. I unpacked everything from my last mining trip because I had just sort of shoved it all into my backpack. I got round to making a red tack box for Jericho and placed it outside of his stall. I also threw up a canvas sign to represent a nameplate. At the end of the day, I went down to my enchanting room and enchanted a diamond shovel. Why on earth would someone enchant a diamond shovel, you may think? Well, the reason was I had a lot of land to flatten for my new arena. Day 113, before I headed off to start working on said arena, I had a few things to craft. I made every possible desensitization item because that was something I hadn't done with Rocky. Basically, once a day you wave tarp or bells or a plastic bag around your horse and they hate it for a bit, but eventually they will become desensitized and just stop caring. I headed out past the back of the paddock saying hi to Jack as I went. A little ways around the corner was a relatively flat bit of land I could transform into an arena. Now, originally my plan was to go all out. I'm talking big arena, sand footing, cute fencing. But as I was carving away at the land and covering up nasty holes and whatnot, I realized I may have gone a little too big. Way too big. It took the entire day and night to even make a dent. I think I'd bitten off a little more than I could chew, but this was still salvageable. While I didn't want to spend the next 20 days making one arena, I could substitute a few things instead. I would leave the floor as grass, and for now, we could ditch the fencing. Even with those amendments, day 113 and 114 were consumed by this arena. Day 115 consisted mostly of finishing everything off. In the evening, I headed home, exhausted, but excited to finally do some proper riding with Jericho. I made sure to take care of him so that he would be in tip-top shape for our first flat work and jumping session. Day 116, I wanted to take things nice and slowly. I felt like I'd been rushing around trying to get things done, and today was just about me and my horse. First, I brought him in from the paddock, fed him some grain, and gave him a thorough groom. After checking him with the vet kit, I determined he was in tip-top shape. I gave him an apple as a treat and quickly set up a slow feeder, which I'd yet to do. I popped his halter on and led him out by the pasture gate. From here, I tacked him up and I was very surprised he didn't try to walk away. I then mounted and rode him through the tall grass by the paddock round to the new arena. I did a little bit of trotting and cantering before I got a bit bored, so I placed down some jumps using the measuring stick. They were very small raised poles, and for the most part, Jericho did so well. He refused quite a bit, but that was only because he was so new to it. I rode around, popping over little jumps until sundown. I had had a lovely, refreshing day of riding and enjoyed untacking Jericho and putting him back in his stall. Day 117, I worked on a dirt path up to the arena and lit up the area around it to try and help decrease the amount of mobs spawning nearby. That took up the whole day, and in the night, I did a moonlit apple harvest. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with all of the apples until I saw you could make apple cider in the stew pot. I made loads, and in my head, I sort of imagined myself being this medieval maiden who sold apple ciders at a market. When I woke up on day 118, my apple ciders were still brewing, so I wanted to get on with a little side project. I did my routine with Jericho and started clearing the land in between my house and the shed so I could put in a little makeshift garden. The theme for this garden was sort of mismatched, a little overgrown, and full of different fruit and veg. See, with Pam's Harvestcraft mod, I had an abundance of random seeds that I could plant, but I didn't want to dedicate land to. This way, I could throw down whatever I had picked up without it going to waste. At sunset, I went over the river into the forest to collect some leaves for the garden. I ended up killing 2 Endermen and almost died myself because I wasn't watching my health. But I survived and went home to pop down the leaves and sleep. Day 119, I finished plowing the garden and threw down a few seeds. I was getting a little sick of all the junk I was picking up over time, and I just didn't see a point in storing any of it. So I wanted to make a lava disposal. Luckily, I knew just the place to get some and went over to my portal to pick it up. I was absolutely baffled when I found a parrot in the forest. I'd been in and out of this forest constantly since it was just over the river from my house, and I had never seen this parrot. I don't know where he came from, but I couldn't just leave him here, obviously. I didn't need another bird, but he needed me, so I tamed him and brought him into my house. He ended up sitting on the sofa like a cutie, and I nicknamed him Skipper. In the night, I constructed a crude cobblestone disposal and started clearing my chest of random junk. Day 120 was pretty uneventful. I was just doing lots of organizing, throwing away, and planting. I did, however, discover the chopping board where I could cut some items into smaller items. Day 121, I found out that Jericho is arachnophobic when I found him jumping around his stall because of a spider. I eliminated the threat and started prepping for my next goal of having a greenhouse. I knew I wanted to put it around the back of the farm and then I wanted it to be a little overgrown and almost abandoned. I had been throwing in a few stacks of sand into the furnace over the last few weeks and now I certainly had enough glass to complete it. The problem was I had put off this project for so long because I didn't have a silk touch pickaxe. I was really scared I would start building the greenhouse and become unhappy with it, essentially wasting stacks of glass because I couldn't pick them back up. But it was about time I put on my big boy pants and committed. I'd done a really good job of building so far and I just needed to trust myself and make sure I had a rough outline. I used my fancy scaffolding and placed down my first few blocks of glass. Soon I had my groove on and I only made a few accidental mistakes. I was very concerned about the roof though, as I had a track record of making it squiff. So far so good, and during the night I took down the wooden guides and filled it in with glass. Honestly, pretty chuffed about my work. I'd definitely been overthinking it, and I was right in trusting the process. I did put up a few hanging lanterns before it turned to day 122, but unfortunately I had a whoopsie daisy and forgot to record. Luckily, not too much happened. I just decorated the greenhouse a little bit, putting in flowers and leaves, as well as installing the new hives. Also, 2 out of the 3 bees had officially disappeared, whether through despawning or straight up running away, I would never know. Day 123, my last bee disappeared. He was not in any of the hives, and I knew that by listening to them, and he was also not in the flower patch or the surrounding area. Honestly, these bees had cost me so much already that I just didn't really care anymore. I had spent quite a few days cooped up at home, so I wanted to go out adventurizing. That's not a word. Why have I written that? Okay, anyway, I really wanted to get a dog because I had the doggy talents mod installed, so they would be super useful. I knew I had seen some wolves when I first started near day 3, so I went to go out and find those. It was going to be Jericho's first actual adventure, so I was excited to take him out. Now, something to know about me is I have quite a bad memory. I'd sort of assumed that I would remember the way to where I'd seen the dogs, but I was quite incorrect in that assumption. After wandering around and getting a little bit lost, I realized it would be harder to find them than I thought, so my next workaround would be to find my very first spawn point and work my way from there, since I could sort of remember the way from the spawn, since I died so many times without setting my bed in the first 100 days. The problem was, I had no idea where my spawn was anymore. I mean, I hadn't been there since like day 20, and I certainly hadn't set a waypoint. After lots of running into trees and swimming, it started getting dark, and I just didn't feel like fighting my way through the night. Just before I made camp, me and Jericho leveled up our bonding, which was one positive aspect of getting a little bit lost. Day 124, I headed back towards my house in hopes I could chance my way to the spawn point. At first, I thought it might be around the back of the mountain by my house, but I was wrong. However, I saw the coolest thing I have ever seen in Minecraft. That's a whale! I absolutely had to get a closer look, so I left Jericho on the shore and went to swim up to it. This was such a weirdly magical experience. I mean, I know it's not a real whale, but seeing something of this size in Minecraft was just astonishing. I did almost drown because I was so fixated on it. I actually had been to these exact waters before collecting kelp, but he wasn't there at that time. I nicknamed him Atlas because it was a cool name for a cool creature. I had no intention of disturbing him further, so after gawking for a while, I just let him be. What an awesome thing to see though. I went back to exploring and at this point had sort of given up on finding the spawn and was just hoping to come across some wolves instead. Then I had the bejesus scared out of me by these possum things. He kept growling at me and it sounded more like a bear than a possum. Either way, I never wanted to see one of those things again, so I went off and collected some lily of the valley flowers. There are also quite a few patches in this dense forest and I just really like them, so I tried to grab as many as I could. Also, have I mentioned how much it sucks to ride swem horses through forests? Because they were so big, they practically don't fit through any of the gaps, so I kept having to try and get up onto the trees. It was rather frustrating. I will admit that the sunset was absolutely beautiful though, and I even came across a herd of wild horses. They were all gorgeous and I wanted to take literally every single one home, but I settled for sleeping amongst them instead. Day 125, with a quarter of the challenge down, I enjoyed the gorgeous views and even briefly considered bringing this stunning chestnut home with me. I decided to continue on, but not long after I came across a strangely sad sight. I found a black foal who was seemingly all alone. No mother in sight. It may have been possible he was part of the herd I had just slept amongst, but they were pretty far away for his little legs. I did genuinely search for his mother, but there were 0 adult horses nearby. I could have taken him to the herd, but maybe they would reject him. I thought I should probably just bring him home with me, right? Plus, he's so small and so cute, I couldn't just leave him there. But there was a major problem. I was almost 1,900 blocks away from my house at this point. I felt really bad having to lead him all that way, so I did another sweep of the area just in case his mum really was nearby. With no sign of her, I practically had to take him with me. I named him Solo for obvious reasons. I was very impressed that despite his tiny little legs, he kept up with Jericho really well. He was so smart and pretty much never got stuck. He even crossed this tiny puddle of water perfectly. I just wrote in my notes for that day, quote, "I love him," and I think that expresses how much I'd become attached to him. I imagined that this tiny colt would grow into the bravest horse and he would be best friends with Jericho. I came across a village and found a horse that looked suspiciously like Solo, but at this point I was basically Gollum and Solo was my precious, so I didn't care if this was one of his parents, I was his mother now. I looted the area and just as I was scouting out the way back for tomorrow, Solo broke free of my lead and jump scared me by becoming an adult. Aw, they grow up so fast. I was a bit gutted he didn't stay a baby for that long, but I imagine now he was just a yearling who was bigger but practically still a baby. That night, I slept in my bedroll with the best view. Day 126 was just about getting home. In the morning, I was distracted by yet another herd near the village, but afterwards I started making some good progress. Solo was amazing. He kept pace, didn't get stuck. We basically flew over the terrain. Even when the forest got crazily dense, if Jericho could get through it, Solo did not faff around. I was not only impressed, but very confident. Too confident. As we went, I spotted some rose bushes on the other side of a ditch. Now, I knew I needed roses to make rose feed so that I could breed Jericho with someone later. Before I knew what was happening, the ground under Jericho was gone. We were stuck on a tiny ledge and one small push would send Solo over. Thinking quickly, I tied him to the cliff face, but I made the terrible mistake of dismounting Jericho. This means I pushed Jericho towards Solo, which knocked him off of the ledge. Jericho then pushed me off, but I landed not too far on a jut on the other side and rapidly extended the platform which was under Jericho. I then quickly tried to place a block under Solo, but I had made a huge mistake, not realizing that even though the lead was preventing him from falling, Minecraft calculated his height based on the bottom of the ravine. He died from fall damage on a block that was just below him. Oh man, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. It was a dumb mistake and I was rushing to get home, so I wasn't paying attention to what the ground was doing. I rescued Jericho, and once he was safely on the other side, I felt like I needed to leave some sort of mark here. I chopped down a tree and made a sign and left a little message. As you can tell, I was really upset. I made my way home and was just sad. I untacked Jericho, put him in his stall, and sat with my birds. Sadly. Then I cooked some sad chicken. Then I sat with Jericho being sad. Then I was mad, so I wanted to take my anger out on some nasty mobs in the paddock, but I was distracted by a skeleton with a jack-o'-lantern head, and a creeper almost blew me up. So yesterday sucked. On day 127, I took some time to decorate to make myself feel better. I got around to putting some stuff on the shelf next to my stairs, as well as stringing up some lights on my balcony. I started clearing the tiny plot of land between the bridge and my house because I kind of wanted to put a flower garden there. I did a load of farm chores and made a crafting table backpack upgrade, which meant I could craft on the go, so that was handy. Day 128, I almost got murdered on my porch and decided I would spend the day training with Jericho. He was already pretty fast from our adventures, but his jump skills were a little lackluster.
I had a wonderful session during the day, and it was just really nice to have a relaxing time bonding with him. In the evening, I scoped out land for a potential track. I wanted to put one in at some point, but I wasn't sure where or of the logistics. I thought that the land connecting my house to the valley was perfect because it was decently level and long enough to fit a straight track. It would be a pain to do, so I did put it on the to-do list for later. Day 129, I had yet to give up on my goal of getting a dog. I was still so sure that there were some wolves around here, so I took Jericho out to look for them. This time, we wouldn't go too far, and I had no intention of bringing anything else home. I fought my way through endless trees and eventually ran straight into a wolf. I whipped out the bones from my backpack and tamed my new companion. When he was tamed, he had a little red sweater on, and immediately the name Dogbert came into my head, so that's what I called him. I won't lie to you, I was a bit miffed that I had gone on a big, long, unsuccessful adventure only for there to be a wolf within 400 blocks of my house. I still had lots of the day left, so I thought it would be a lovely idea to take Jericho and our new family member Dogbert out for a ride. But just as we were leaving, Jericho bucked when I asked him to trot, and he kicked Dogbert right in the face. Luckily, he was fine. I just force-fed him some roast chicken to get his health up. That was certainly something I would need to watch out for. On our ride, I wanted to see what was straight on from my house, but we only made it to the foot of the mountain before I came across a horse that looked exactly like Sporkle. Sporkle is my channel mascot, and I love her to bits, so I absolutely had to seize this opportunity. Even in vanilla form, she was so pretty. Dogbert seemed to like her too, and it was about time I gave Jericho a pasture buddy, since Jack wasn't particularly fond of him and preferred to be left alone at the back of the paddock. I cut our ride short in favor of bringing Sporkle home. Wow, that's 2 new animals in one day. I ponied Sporkle from the back of Jericho, and Dogbert followed suit. Look at the squad rolling out. It was nighttime when we arrived home, and after I untacked Jericho, he fell asleep pretty quickly, so he must have been tired. I gave Sporkle the vacant stall on the end and put up a nameplate for her. I decided not to turn her into a swem horse just yet, and instead make sure I was fully prepped for her transition. I made her a pretty pink halter and renamed the other halters to include the names of the horses they belong to. That night, I decided it was time to retire Rocky's halter for good. I left most of his stuff outside his stall because it made me sad to move them, but instead of collecting dust, I would put his halter in my bedroom where I could see it when I wake up every morning. Small steps. Day 130, I woke up to find Dogbert with his head in my bookshelf, which did not come as a surprise considering he was such a distinguished gentleman. I spent a lot of the day doing minor renovations to the stables, like equipping all of them with a faucet for the buckets and hanging hay nets. I then made a full set of brown English tack for Sporkle as well as a tack box. While I was busy crafting, Dogbert made himself useful by vibrating under the table. Day 131, I brought Jericho in for his breakfast and a drink of water before tying him up outside Sporkle's stable so that he could watch her turn into a swem horse. I was then promptly distracted by an Enderman who I chased around my farm until eventually stared him down and killed him, where he dropped a single dandelion. I was heartbroken at the thought of this Enderman just picking flowers before being murdered, but that's just how things go. It was finally time to turn Sporkle into a swem horse, and I promptly found a coat that was pretty similar to hers. Jericho stared at her like he was in love, but she was more interested in the grass outside. Sorry, buddy. I wanted to give her some time alone to adjust, so I took Jericho out to the arena for a jumping session. After a little while, it started raining, but we continued anyway. When it started to get really dark, I took him back and made sure to bring both horses in away from the rain since they didn't have blankets yet. I then spontaneously decided to head off in the middle of the night to find a new spot for mining. I was mostly looking for name tags, but would welcome other bits and bobs too. Day 132, I went down into the depths of the earth and robbed a skeleton of their backpack, which contained a music disc. I then repeatedly played the music disc while mining to give my sleep-deprived brain something to listen to.
Day 133, I emerged from the ground and went home. On my way back, I came across another donkey in the same place I had found Jack. She was too small to ride and I didn't have a lead on me, so I left a waypoint so I could go and get her later. I tell you, water plus shaders plus sunset equals the most gorgeous sights. When I got home, I took care of the horses who were both asleep and set about naming all the animals who had yet to be named. Dogbert, Skipper, Jericho, and Sporkle all now officially had names. Day 134 was named Dogbert Day, but before that could begin, I had to take care of the horses. I had gotten into the bad habit of leaving stall doors open as I frantically grabbed food, brushes, and desensitization items, so Jericho made a lazy attempt at escaping, and just after I had pushed him back in, Sporkle wandered out of her stall. I then finally remembered that Dogbert had so much hidden potential. He was a vanilla dog, so with the help of a training treat, he became a doggy talents dog. Turned out I had wasted a name tag on him since I could just rename him in the menu, but oh well. I did reskin him to look like a German Shepherd, but unfortunately he lost his gentleman's sweater. However, I could now level up his skills with dog treats and give him different points in different skills. I spent a lot of his points on making him a herding dog and a guarding dog, so that if I needed to move mobs or have him protect me in a fight, he could do so without endangering himself. I also gave him the ability to growl when creepers were around so they couldn't sneak up on me. I then loaded Dogbert into a boat so we could go and retrieve the donkey. He was super cute sitting in the boat, but the problem was, when I tried loading the donkey into the boat, Dogbert was so excited to go that he would also get in, leaving no room for me. This was a little bit frustrating as it did slow me down so much that I didn't make it back before nightfall and we had to stop at Rocky's village to sleep. Day 135, I did successfully get the donkey home. I led her into the paddock so she could go meet Jack before realizing Sporkle had somehow escaped and was on the other side of the fence. I retrieved her and decided the new donkey's name would be Jenny. Jack seemed to like Jenny, so I was happy he would have a companion to stand with him all the way back here. Day 136 was pretty quiet as I did farm work all day and did some cooking in the evening. Day 137, I decided to do a huge harvest of my crops. The reason for this was because I had 2 horses to feed and at some point I wanted to breed Sporkle and Jericho, so I wanted to be 100% sure I had the resources to support them and a foal. Harvesting was the easy bit and it only took until noon, but it was the planting that was going to take forever. I got a rhythm on, but it got dark before I even made a dent in my workload. For context, it was also really late at night when I was filming, so I pooped my pants when this zombie came out of nowhere and it scared me so badly I had to take a moment in the pause screen. I really wish I had lighting for the water sources on the farm so that the mobs wouldn't spawn so frequently, but I soldiered on. As the sun rose behind my house on day 139, I finished up the last of the planting. I made a couple of rugs for the horses and then took Jericho out on a ride. There was really no purpose for this ride besides spending time with him and getting his stats up. Day 140, I made a buttload of shovels to make a start on the racetrack. I literally spent the entire day flattening and filling in some of the land, and Dogbert also watched me as I went to sleep. Day 141, 2, and 3 were dedicated to this track. Day 144, I went cave exploring, mostly for coal to make lots of torches. This was the best mining experience I have ever had because Dogbert did an excellent job of killing most, if not all, mobs before they even got to me. I could now mine in peace without being jump scared every 2 minutes. Day 145, I resurfaced, took care of the horses, and made a Cantazorite anvil, which would allow me to rename things without an XP cost. That night, I continued the track by putting in the railings and filling in the last of the holes. Day 146, I finally finished the track. It had been a pretty long process, but it was going to make training the horses so much easier. That day was also amazing because Jericho walked over to me on his own accord and gave me a hug. Day 147, I looked out my window and just admired my progress. Although, on a surface level, not that much had changed. We were almost halfway through and I'd completed most of my goals, which was a really good feeling. But the greenhouse was still beeless and my market stall was still traderless. I found Jericho and Sporkle grazing together like a couple of cuties. My plan was to grab both of them and take them to the track, hoping I could ride both in one day. Sporkle stood quietly tacked up while I raced Jericho up and down my new track. Unfortunately, I ran out of time before it was dark and I did not want to risk a creeper blowing my horses up. Day 148, I showed Sporkle some love by taking her to the track by herself. I also threw up a few steeplechase jumps so I could train speed and jump at the same time. The next day, I trained Jericho on steeplechase too. Day 150, halfway through, I decided it was time to upgrade my gear from diamond to netherite. Problem was, I had no idea how to get it. I popped into the nether and attempted strip mining to absolutely no success. Day 151, I had a new strat thanks to a Google search which told me I should mine using TNT as that was the best method. Luckily, I had lots of sand, gravel and gunpowder so I could get stuck right in. I have to tell you, this method of mining is so exhilarating. It's just explosion after explosion and down comes the rain of lava. Very cool. This method proved to be ideal as I started finding more and more netherite. My mining continued on to day 152 and after running out of TNT, I came out of the portal at night. I promptly smelted and crafted the netherite to upgrade all my gear including my pickaxe and sword, which by the way have been renamed to Smack Attack and Old Reliable. Day 153, I did my normal farm chores and you may have noticed I have a new skin on. This one was made by my best friend Queasy and I really like it. I also officially moved Rocky's stuff from outside of his old stall so that one day I could maybe put a new horse in there. Day 154, I prepped for an adventure. Before I started packing, I put Rocky's blanket in an item frame next to his halter. I also popped his tack box on the top shelf, so now this previously barren section of my bedroom was now filled with items that meant a lot to me. Then I got back to work. On this adventure, I was going to go as far as I could. It would definitely be a multi-night adventure. I ended up grabbing Rocky's old saddlebags and put them on Jericho so I could pack them. I made sure to put in water buckets and feed as well as various other tools and blocks. And of course, lots of lead ropes because you never know. In the evening, I cooked so much steak so I could stay well fed for the entire journey. Day 155, I took care of both horses as quickly as I could and tacked Jericho up. Jericho, Dogbert, and myself took off as soon as possible in the same direction I had gone to find the wolves. Instead of following the coast though, we went deeper inland into the forest, and without realizing it, we were also climbing an incline. Eventually, I started noticing steep cliff faces and was stopped in our tracks by a river slicing the mountain in half. I definitely could have dirt bridged it, but one, I wanted to keep the overworld as clean and pristine as possible, and two, that would have been pretty dangerous. Instead, I got comfortable with the idea of building a bridge out of wooden fences so that I could use it again on my way back. I cleared the nearby trees for an easy path and to get wood for the bridge. I'd pretty much finished the body when night fell, so I slept in my bedroll to skip the darkness. Day 156, I finished the bridge off and continued my journey. The bridge had taken a good chunk of the day, so I didn't get too far, but the views were certainly incredible. I could see a village on the horizon and wanted to aim for that tomorrow. Day 157, I made my way down towards the village and found a broken nether portal on the way. I then ran into a herd of horses and low-key fell in love with this black and white paint horse. I would have taken it home if I was on my way back, but I wanted to go so much further and there was no point dragging this horse all the way there and back. I got to the village and switched Jericho's bridle for his halter so that he could graze and drink. I went off to loot the village and made the grave mistake of picking on this lizard. I wanted to see what he dropped, but then I got my ass handed to me and almost died. Dogbert was no help at all. Soon we were back on the metaphorical road, cantering through meadows and swimming through rivers before deciding to make camp. Dogbert and I went to go beat up some cows for dinner before settling down for the night. Nothing much happened on day 158 other than seeing a shark, raiding a village, and drooling over this horse that looked like a fjord. Day 159, on my way further into the unknown, I came across this family of donkeys, except they weren't normal donkeys, they were miniature. They were all smaller than a meter, and the baby was absolutely minuscule! A part of me really wanted to take them home. I had been out for 4 days now, and bringing animals back would probably also extend my time to get back. I debated it for a while and decided to leave a waypoint just in case I changed my mind. I continued on, this time hitting the coast where I spotted a shipwreck. I went over to loot it, hoping the sharks wouldn't nibble my toes, and ended up scoring a bunch of XP potions for the horses. Day 160 was wet and miserable until I found another stunning black and white paint horse. This was actually my third one, and I felt like the game was trying to tell me something. I kept debating with myself whether or not to bring it home, so I went back and forth with the logistics in my head. Technically, if I brought her home, I would have 3 adult horses and potentially we could have 2 foals instead of 1. I decided to sleep on it, and Dogbert made sure the horses didn't stand on my head during the night. Day 161, I had made a decision. I would leave Dogbert here with Nova, yes, I've named her now, go back and get all 3 mini donkeys, then rendezvous here and take off towards home tomorrow morning. The minis weren't too far away, but the terrain wasn't great for their tiny legs. It did take almost the whole day, but we made it back to the meeting point, and I got mentally prepped for the hell that was going to be the next few days. Day 162 was hell. If I thought bringing 1 horse home was hard, taking a horse and 3 tiny donkeys across over 2,200 blocks was a special kind of torture. There was always someone who got caught on a block or a tree, and sometimes they would push each other into situations that got them stuck. I tried my best to stick to flatter terrain and chose not to scale any mountains for fear of being blocked by a sudden drop-off. Eventually, I had a saving grace, which was a river where all the animals could float along with little to no problems. I ended up having to leash Dogbert because he was a really slow swimmer. Day 163 was slightly more nightmarish as I came across a lava fall. If I tried to bring all of them past at once, I was sure one of them would be pushed into it. So I started the slow process of bringing them past one by one. Once they were all clear of it, I looked up in horror to see my bridge. This was great because it meant I was closer to home, but it also meant I had a cliff face to scale with 6 animals and then a super dense forest to get through. I chose to take the scaling at a slightly less life-threatening angle, but it meant we were now on the other side of the bridge and further from home. I tell you, trying to get up this mountain with everyone on a leash was so painful. I did eventually make it about 3/4 of the way up before retiring to my bedroll. I spent all of day 164 clearing a path through the worst of the forest just to make my life a little bit easier. Dogbert kept me company while I chopped down trees and filled in various holes that animals could fall into. Day 165 was much of the same, just making slow progress and watching the block counter tick down as we went. Day 166 was the last stretch, yay! And I finally, after 11 days, saw my home again. I have never been so happy to see my beautiful house and stables. We painstakingly made our way down the hill and across the river until we were finally there. Please remind me to never do that again. I quickly sorted my super full backpack and inventory and then tended to Jericho's needs by untacking him and putting a blanket on. He had a big drink of water when he got in and all of his feeders were full for him to enjoy. I brought Nova into the paddock to meet Sporkle and they seemed to get on. Sporkle settled down to sleep near her, so that was a good sign. I led the donkeys into Rocky's stall temporarily as I really needed to build somewhere separate for them. I then had roast chicken for dinner and collapsed into my bed at home. On day 167, I just wanted to stay home and chill, so I went onto my balcony to scope out places to put the mini donkey paddock. I sort of figured I could put it in the plot of land next to my house since I never ended up doing anything with it. Whilst having a look around, I also thought that with all my horses at home now, I probably needed a tack and feed room to keep things organized. Maybe I could put that besides the stable. After taking care of my swem horses, I crafted some water troughs for their paddocks so they always had access to fresh water. It did start raining, so I grabbed Sporkle her rug and let her decide if she wanted to come inside or not. Then I made a paddock feeder so the horses could get their fill of hay even when they were outdoors. The mini donkeys were so cute but didn't look so happy stuck inside. I decided to make a start on their pasture. I actually finished it pretty quickly as all I had to do was put in some fencing and build them an open shelter. During the night, I replaced the flooring in the shelter with leftover mats so they would be a little more comfortable. Day 168, I updated the paths to include both the bridge and the mini donkey paddock. I then put in a few more lampposts to help with the mob spawning rates. That night, I moved the donkeys into their new home and baked some leaves to make a bag of shavings. I then placed the shavings in the shelter, which made it look so cozy. Day 169, I made a purple tack box for Nova, who is not yet a swem horse. I think I was nervous to have yet another horse I needed to take care of, so I did put it off for a little bit. I started working on a tack room, and after I'd finished the foundation, walls, and 90% of the roof, I decided I wanted to flip the L shape to the other side. I then spent all night correcting my design. On day 170, I finished doing the exterior during the day, and during the night, I put in the loft and the flooring. Then my worst nightmare happened, and while I was preoccupied with killing 2 creepers who had spawned in the paddock, a 3rd creeper snuck up on me and blew a huge chunk out of Rocky's stable. Luckily, Nova's tack box did drop, but I was mortified at how much the creeper had damaged. Day 171, I crafted some stuff to decorate the tack room, but I took so long that it was nighttime when I went in to start putting stuff down, and when I looked out into the paddock, there were so many mobs. I noped out of there and just went to bed. I had lots of fun on day 172 decorating the tack room. I'm really fond of designs that are both practical and aesthetic, so finding a nice balance was really enjoyable. I used the tail end of the L design to put in a feed/kitchen station, and the rest of the building has spaces for saddle racks, bridle racks, and tack boxes. I even put in a table and chairs and used spare buckets as decoration. Day 173, I did a major stock up of the new feed room. I basically made as much sweet feed as I could possibly make, which ended up being a lot. Then I made so many quality bales, which was made up of all the alfalfa and timothy hay I had harvested earlier on. Day 174 was dead boring as I just sorted chests and my backpack. I wanted to go down mining again tomorrow, so I needed as much space as possible. Day 175 was raining, so I took Nova out instead of the swem horses just because she was easier. I wanted to go out towards the village in the valley to look for a cave system that hadn't been completely stripped like the ones close to my house. I found a decent sized hole and tried to be really cool and do the water bucket trick, but I failed quite miserably. Down into the depths I went with Dogbert by my side. I finally found a lush cave and was excited to harvest all the goodies it had. I hadn't seen one until now and frankly forgot they were even a thing. Then Dogbert decided to dip his toes in some lava and give me total panic since he burned for so long. He ended up surviving, but oh my god, that could have been disastrous. Really made me stop and remember that Dogbert wasn't immortal and I needed to be way more careful. I carried on scavenging the caves before I came across a skeleton spawner. The idea popped into my head to make a mob grinder to make XP farming a little bit easier for myself. With the idea brewing in my head, I kept mining for about 2 days until day 177 when I actually started constructing my mob grinder. I followed a tutorial from iCraftMC and it was really helpful. I needed some supplies to finish making the grinder, so I made my way home in the night. Day 178, while I was back at the house, I crafted a grey small gate to give me easy access to the paddock next to the tack room. I then rode all the way back to my grinder to finish it. Hey, anyone remember around day 108 when I found the zombie spawner that was maybe, I don't know, 30 blocks from my house? Yeah, apparently I did not remember that, so now I have to travel 600 blocks to get there. I used some of my rope to create easy access up and down to the spawner. I filled in all the extra bits I needed and then enabled the spawner again. The grinder worked perfectly, but I hadn't realized that if the campfire was killing them, it wouldn't drop the XP. I removed the campfire in favor of manual swinging, and it was pretty effective this way. I spent the rest of the time grinding my way through XP levels. On the night of day 179, I headed home because it was soon going to be time to turn Nova into a swem horse, and not long after that, I would get to breed. Day 180 was a gloomy, rainy day. After putting blankets on both Sporkle and Jericho, I noticed their paddock had become a little barren because they were eating so much of the grass. My solution was to just bone meal the entire paddock to give them more grass to munch on, but I sort of hated how it looked like an overgrown, abandoned field. Shortly after, it was sunny again, so I returned to take the rugs off the horses. I'm pretty sure that's what 90% of horse ownership is, just putting blankets on and taking them off 10 minutes later. I spent the rest of the day organizing chests, and when I went into the greenhouse to put in the new spore blossoms and flowering azaleas, I was a little saddened by its beelessness. I put it on the list yet again to go find some. I swear, if the next lot leave, I am never trying to get any again. That night, I wandered around in the dark hoping to find a zombie villager to no avail. Day 181, I brewed some new Cantazorite potions for Nova. I made sure to have a name tag handy, and as the sun set, she was transformed. I tried taming her and she came very close to killing me and also kicked Jericho at one point. I then gave her a secret swem coat so that she could have her original look. Excited about the prospect of breeding, I headed to bed. Day 182, my paddock was filled with all the ponies. My herd was bigger than I had originally planned, and in a few days we would breed Nova and Sporkle to Jericho and have even more. But in the meantime, I gave the mini donkeys some love by naming them Mindy, Marvin, and Milo. I took Nova out for a ride and she was pretty slow. However, she was really well behaved, and this might be crazy of me, but I feel like she bucked much less than Jericho and Sporkle did. Honestly, I was just glad to have her. When we got back, I gave her some apples from my orchard and left all the horses turned out so they could try and mow down the grass a little bit. Day 183, I forgot to record. However, luckily, I was just putting in a new paddock after bringing the horses in for food. I figured with the herd size of 5, I would need way more paddock space than I currently had, so I made a second paddock out the back close to the arena. This field would be further away from the stables, so if I had horses that were out of work, I could put them in there with hay nets and just let them hang out. Day 184 was a nice chill day. I turned the horses out, harvested some sugarcane, and took Nova out on the track. I won't lie, I was a little nervous about breeding, but decided tomorrow I would commit and get Sporkle pregnant first, then Nova the day after. Then came day 185, which was breeding day. I got a bit distracted when I heard a musical backpack and was preoccupied for a little bit trying to rescue the straw golem who'd been trapped underground for God knows how long. I was both excited and nervous, but after procrastinating enough, I grabbed my rose feeds and put Jericho and Sporkle into love mode. They made some purple hearts and Sporkle was officially pregnant! Yee! And now I have already decided that I will let you, the viewer, name both of the foals. So brainstorm some names and tell me in the comments. Jericho was now on cooldown, so I had to wait until tomorrow to breed Nova. Day 186, I was back out in the paddock to breed Nova and Jericho. It was a success, so 2 babies were officially on the way. I actually took Nova out on the track for a little bit of training that day too, and in the evening I made fried eggs and a fried egg sandwich. Day 187, I took care of the horses, made more egg sandwiches, and fed the donkeys. I was tentative about going too far in case one of the horses gave birth while I was away. That didn't last long though, as on day 188, I wanted to go for a ride. Unluckily for me, it was raining, so first I had to tend to the horses. I was noticing that Nova preferred being in her stable, with Sporkle preferring being in the field, which I thought was a cute little difference. I decided to load Dogbert into the boat to have a mini adventure, but it was kind of bust since we found nothing and saw nothing. Well, that's not true. I did see Atlas again, which was nice. Day 189, I jumped out my window and picked up poop in the field. Then I did my usual farm chores, and when I came back, Sporkle had given birth! She had a beautiful ginger baby, sorry, a chestnut foal, and it was absolutely adorable. I couldn't see the gender until it was grown up, which sucked, but our first foal was finally here. Please give me name suggestions, as I am completely out of ideas at this point. The foal was such a cutie, and I was really excited to see Nova's foal tomorrow. That night, I checked in with them again, and Sporkle and Jericho were snuggled, and it just made my heart melt. What a dream team these two made. Day 190 was raining, but when I checked the field, Nova had already given birth. A lovely dark brown foal was here. We had 2 new little members of the family, and I didn't want them to catch a cold, so I brought them inside with their mothers. That day, I also popped into the Nether to get some glowstone so I could light up my field and a couple of other water sources. Day 191, I turned the horses out and just sat and watched them for a while. I even saw Nova hand off her baby to Jericho so that she could have some time to herself. I then saw Sporkle switch out her child for Nova's for some reason, and Nova just hid at the back of the field trying to get some alone time. Speaking of the back of the field, you may be wondering where Jack and Jenny are. You see, they disappeared shortly after I updated my horse genetics mod, and I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I just like to imagine that they fell in love and escaped into the wild to grow old together, or something like that. I decided it was time to rip off the band-aid and go get some bees. I waved goodbye to the horses, knowing they were happy, and set off in a boat with Dogbert. Honestly, Dogbert was basically my best friend. He accompanied me everywhere I went, protected me, and watched me while I slept. I was really glad I got a dog. They really are a man's best friend. No bees today, so I camped out and continued looking on day 192. I ended up right over by my bridge since I had actually heard bees when we came through here with Nova and the minis. I managed to grab 2 fresh out of the hive just before it started raining. This kind of sucked because if the bees got loose, they would fly straight back home and mobs would be spawning, so I had to be careful. As usual, Dogbert came in clutch and we made it home safely. When I brought them into the greenhouse, they refused to go into the hives, so I was frustrated that I sucked at beekeeping. So I named them Vanessa and Barry to prevent them from despawning and locked them in the greenhouse so that they couldn't escape. I forgot to put myself on the other side of the barricade, but that's not the point. Day 193, I went to the Nether for more glowstone and to have a bit of an explore. Day 194 was raining again, so I brought the horses inside and installed lots of glowstone to light up my farm in a relatively discreet and aesthetic way. Thankfully, the bees had gone into their hive, which meant I could now be assured that they weren't going anywhere. Day 195, with only 5 days left, I wanted to commit to one final project. I had built that darn market stall and I was going to go get a villager even if it took me the next 5 days. While my boat method didn't work the first time, I had adapted my strategy. Now that I had a racetrack, all I needed to do was to get a villager to that point. Instead of using the village in the valley, I would instead pick someone from the village on the mountain, create a temporary bridge up in the sky, and easily row over to drop onto the racetrack. And that is exactly what I did. First, I chose a villager who is a cleric and offered 1 emerald for 32 rotten flesh. I trapped him in a boat and started working on a bridge that was only a single block wide. Of course, I made sure to sit Dogbert so he wouldn't follow me along and fall. I was making brilliant progress, but ran out of blocks in the night. I grabbed Dogbert and returned back home briefly to stock up on materials before then returning to the village and starting back on the bridge. Only this time, I had forgotten to sit Dogbert down, so he daringly followed me along the narrow blocks in the sky. He was a smart cookie, so I knew he wouldn't fall on his own. I just had to make sure not to push him. When I reached the end, right above the racetrack, I threw down a bucket of water so I could get down. I stupidly didn't wait until the water had reached the bottom before I started climbing down, and Dogbert quite literally followed me to his death. Dogbert! Dogbert, no! No! No, Dogbert! I'm really upset. I knew as soon as I was up there that it was stupid. It was stupid time I'm up there. Oh man, I'm really upset. It's always on the last few days that I get stupid and I want to do more. And I wanted to get the village. First it was Rocky and now Dogbert. I didn't cry when I lost Rocky because I thought he was still alive. Because I thought maybe I would find him. And I didn't. And now... my golems have jackets on? Why do my golems have jackets on? Oh my god, they're festive jackets because it's the 1st of December. They're really cute. Oh man, if you are not in tears after watching that, you're probably made of stone. But I bring good news because shortly after crying my eyes out, I came to my senses and checked the wiki to see if the Doggy Talents dogs could be brought back, and sure enough... Wait, it says I can bring the dog back. It says I can... Please. Dogbert! Oh my god, I'm so happy. Oh my god, Dogbert, please never do that again. Oh my god, Dogbert. Oh my god, you gave me a heart attack. Don't do that. Oh my god, you made me ugly cry. It was now day 196 and I have never been so thankful that I put down that dog bed. What an absolute roller coaster that was to experience. After taking a brief moment, I left Dogbert at home to go get that stupid villager myself. Just like I had planned, it was a piece of cake getting him home, and I shoved him into the market stall, never to bother me again. That whole losing Dogbert scare had me really thinking about Rocky. As I said, I hadn't cried when I lost him because a part of me was so sure that I would find him again. Tonight, I decided to accept that Rocky wasn't coming back, but now I had so many horses and a dog that were amazing in their own way. Day 197, I happily deconstructed the ugly sky highway, and on day 198, I made a baby bee, which was exactly what I needed to see at the time. Day 199, I decided Jericho, Dogbert, and I would go to visit Rocky's grave. I had yet to do so since leaving it on day 101, and I had wanted to at some point, but the time just sort of got away from me. I enjoyed the ride there as I hadn't really been over this way anywhere near as often as I was in the first 100 days. Thanks to Jericho's swift speed and Dogbert's teleportation, we got to Rocky's grave fairly early in the day. I had nothing planned, no goals, and no danger to face. Today it was about honouring Rocky's memory by keeping him company with Jericho and Dogbert exactly 100 days after his disappearance. I brought a piece of honeycomb to honour the fact that the day he went missing we were out getting bees, and now I had successfully farmed some honeycomb to give to Rocky. As the sun set, I knew tomorrow was going to be a beautiful day. After almost 60 hours of playtime, I had successfully made it to day 200. Unlike on day 100 where I started at home and ended on Rocky's grave, it was somewhat symbolic that I was starting here and moving on to go home. Jericho, Dogbert, and I packed up and made our way back to the house. I savoured every step of the way, and when I arrived I said hello to the mini donkeys and Jeffrey the villager. What a ride these last 100 days had been. I spent the rest of the day sitting in the paddock with Jericho, Sporkle, Nova, and their babies. Dogbert, of course, kept himself entertained, and as the sun set on the final day, I was ready to embrace the final 100 days to make it all the way to 300. Day 201, woohoo! We are back for a third time and I have so many plans and goals to achieve. First, let's address the dog-shaped elephant in the room. Dogbert is actually a girl, as was pointed out in my last video, which I completely missed. So I'll be referring to Dogbert as a she from now on. I was so happy to be back in my world and to see all of my lovely horses. We still had 2 foals who were going to be named by your comments from the last video, but I was really excited to see what they look like grown up. But for now, I did my usual routine of filling up water troughs and grain feeders. I grabbed my gear from my backpack and all of it was in a right state in terms of durability, so I made my first priority getting more netherite. But before that, I wanted to check on the bees. If you remember from the last 200 days, me and the bees don't have a particularly good relationship, so I half expected them to be gone. Luckily for me, Barry was still buzzing around happily before I broke the peace and they attempted to terrorize me for taking their honey like a less cute Winnie the Pooh. I finished off my first day back with some apple picking. Day 202, I crafted lots of TNT and headed to my nether portal. I tried to get Dogbert to come with me now that I knew that she could respawn, but I just couldn't get her through. Instead, I braved the lava-filled hellscape by myself. I spent all day extracting ancient debris, and I can't say that it was particularly riveting gameplay. I popped back into the overworld on day 203 and crafted my netherite ingots to repair all of my tools and armor. Day 204, I threw out an obscene number of stacks of netherrack and headed down to the nearby mines, but this time I was aiming to rediscover the spawner I had seen on day 108. It didn't make sense to go all the way to my jungle spawner if there was one so close to my house. I did eventually find it and started on the arduous task of building the grinder. This time though, instead of having a boring rope to climb up and down, I wanted to build a water elevator to spice things up. Day 205, I headed out in the boat with Dogbert to get some more kelp because it was required to make the water elevator. I said hello to Atlas, who swam amongst the kelp in the shallow waters. I also found this random bee who may have been an escapee from my hives, but I wasn't sure. I led him back home into the greenhouse and started on my elevator. Day 206 proved fatal when I essentially did the same thing that originally killed Dogbert by swimming down further than the water had started flowing, falling straight down 100 blocks or so. Thoroughly embarrassed that it had taken less than a week for my first death to occur, I trudged over to my tunnels in the rain. The elevators were awkward to make since I needed to place kelp all the way up both elevators to turn the water into source blocks, so that when I placed the soul sand and magma block at the bottom, the bubbles would reach the top. The elevator spanned over 100 blocks and I had no way of surviving underwater that long without a breathing potion or a turtle helmet. Hating the idea of slaughtering turtles, I opted for the potion, which would require nether wart and a pufferfish. This presented me with the chance to do something I hadn't before: go fishing. I was kind of excited since I had grown to really love the Stardew Valley fishing, and I hoped I would enjoy it in Minecraft too. I made the fishing rod and enchanted it, getting enchantments better than I could ever wish for: Unbreaking 3, Luck of the Sea 2, and Lure 2. I headed to my bridge to do some night fishing. It didn't take long for me to wrangle my first catch, and I repeated the process until I had my pufferfish. I quickly googled how to get nether warts, and after realizing it would be a nightmare to try and find a fortress on foot in the nether, I crafted a warped fungus on a stick so I could ride a strider. I headed into the nether, and on day 207 I found a suitable mount. I never ended up naming this little guy, but I appreciated his ability to traverse lava nonetheless. I started searching for the nether fortress, and after a while I was lucky enough to come across one. Geared in netherite, I figured I was more than well equipped to kick some butt. Ow. Ow. Despite the rocky start, I had found a blaze spawner. I figured that it was worthwhile farming since blazes dropped a decent amount of XP and I wouldn't have to craft blaze rods out of ender pearls anymore. After getting bored with that, I pressed on and faced my first wither skeletons. These mobs were really scary because of their height and the fact that they kept hurting you even after they were dead. I found a few chests but no nether warts, and I practically ran out of my supply of egg sandwiches. I decided to be smart and leave before I got killed. I came back about midday of day 208. I didn't plan on sticking around for long, just a quick refill of my supplies. I grabbed some steak as well as some golden apples to try and make killing the wither skeletons a little less dangerous. Soon I was back in the fortress, kicking butt for real this time. I ran into a slight hitch when my golden helmet broke, but I managed to quickly craft one by smooshing all my golden nuggets together before the piglins saw. I was relieved when I finally found some nether warts. I'd pretty much cleared out the entire fortress by this point, so swiftly headed home for my portal again. It was now the morning of day 209 and I finally had the ingredients for my potion of water breathing. While I was waiting for it to brew, I mucked out the horse's paddock. When it was finished, I grabbed my kelp and headed down to finish the elevator. And you will never guess what I did again. With my ego bruised and my patience thin, I managed to get the elevator finished and the grinder working. Was it worth all of this trouble? I don't know, but I also don't care because it was now finished. Day 210, I was just grinding my XP level, and while I waited for the zombies to spawn, I answered my Instagram DMs. Speaking of which, you should definitely follow me over on Instagram at Abigail Pinehaven. After way too much time underground, I emerged on day 211. I spent most of my time sorting the chests and added a new layer of barrels to the storeroom. In the night, I visited the horsies to give them all a good brush and a feed. When they settled down to sleep, I noticed Nova had just given up on parenting, and Sporkle now had both babies with her as she tried to get some shut-eye. Day 212, I made 2 really cute grooming boxes that I could leave in the tack room and outside the stables. I also decided to commit and turn my axe and shovel into netherite and enchant them both. Then I crafted a few horse toys and pooped my pants at the skulls I had put in the storehouse. Jesus, oh my god. Day 213, I mucked out the paddock and was itching to go on a ride. I picked Sporkle as my companion today because I felt like she had been doing the most shifts as mum and could use some time away. I would have to start weaning the foals in a few weeks, so I kept that in mind. I tacked her up in the paddock so that her foal knew what was going on, and Sporkle and I set off for a lovely ride in the valley. There was no purpose for the ride, so I got to really enjoy myself. We came across some wolves, and for a split second, I was like, do I want another dog? Followed by, but should I get another dog? And I had some self-restraint and decided maybe another day. When we returned, it was already really late, but I wanted to craft some ender eyes because the plan was to go out and locate the end portal tomorrow. Day 214, I grabbed my ender pearls and Jericho's tack as quickly as possible since I wanted an early start. My plans were thwarted by the fact Jericho seemed to be responsible for the kids today, and even after I tried to give Nova's foal back to her, she had no shame in walking and dumping her foal on him again. I suspected she wasn't a huge fan of motherhood and made a mental note to retire her from breeding. When I finally pried both foals off of Jericho, I threw my first ender eye. The direction pointed to the overgrowth behind my property, so that's the way we headed. It took us right up to the shore, and I chose to swim Jericho across in hopes that there was more land just on the horizon. But after a tedious amount of swimming and only a small island to ride across, I decided to switch Jericho in for a boat. Dogbert piled into the small raft with me, and we saw a seal flop into the water. He was quite a chunky boy. We reached another island as the sun was beginning to set, and I promptly realized that I had missed the location because the eyes were telling me to turn around. I gave up and slept through the night on the island. We made our way back, and it dawned on me there was a high possibility that the dungeon was probably underwater, which made the whole ordeal so much trickier. My fears were confirmed when the ice shot straight down just off the coast of the island we had left Jericho on. Luckily for me, this section wasn't too deep, but it was going to be a bit of a headache. I left the waypoint and headed home. It was the evening when we returned, so I decided to bring all the horses in for the night so I could make sure they were all eating and drinking enough. Day 216, I received a comment from Black Cat Studios 5502 that informed me I could put mobs on the swem horses. I didn't quite believe it, so after I put Nova's baby in with Jericho, let her eat breakfast and tacked her up, I headed over to the sheep pen to try this out. Lo and behold, this information was indeed correct, and I couldn't help but think back to how that whole ordeal with the Sky Highway and Dogbert dying could have been avoided if I had just known about this feature. The Swem Wiki really needed to communicate these features properly. The same way I couldn't find any information about putting the animals on the Swem horse, I also couldn't find how to put them down. I tried every button combo and even checked the hotkey controls, but it wasn't even listed there. Unfortunately, I had to dispatch the sheep to get it off Nova, which was less than helpful if I wanted to bring mobs back alive. I got back to the stables and did my routine with the horses before I headed off to do some fishing. After catching a load of good loot, including another rod with some awesome enchantments, I suddenly remembered that Jeffrey, my villager, needed a bed. I quickly crafted him a cute red checkered bed so that he had somewhere to sleep other than the floor. I also merged my old rod with the new one so I got even better enchantments and named it something fishy. Wasn't my best work in terms of naming, but it would have to do. I went back to fishing and did that all night, periodically scrolling through my Instagram on @AbigailPinehaven. Okay, that's the last time I'll bring it up, I swear. The night flew by and it was now on day 217. I wanted to make some horse armor so that when I went out on adventures, my equines would be extra safe. I did the hundreds of steps required to make swem horse armor and even went as far as to upgrade it to Netherite. Dogbert kept a watchful eye on me from where she had wedged herself behind my grindstone. I grabbed Nova's tack because I wanted her to model the armor, just before realizing you can't put armor on a horse that doesn't have a full set of adventure tack. I did have all of it at one point, but Rocky had gone missing with most of it on. I decided to put down an armor stand so I could display the armor, but I can't lie, it looked really weird. It looked like some kind of bionic cow. Soon it started raining, so I took a moment to Google the best way to get rid of water so that I could easily access the dungeon which had the end portal in it. I hadn't come across any sponges yet, so gravel and sand seemed like my best option. I grabbed all my available gravel and made a ton of rope so that I could easily lower myself into the dungeon. After that was done, I went back to fishing because it was kind of fun. Day 218, it was still raining, so I made sure to check on the horses while they stayed safe and dry in their stalls. Jeffrey was still giving me the cold shoulder despite his new bed, and the armor rack in my tack room still weirded me out. I really don't know why, it just looks wrong. Despite the weather, I decided I would take Nova out to go to the dungeon to see how many Eyes of Ender I needed, as well as grab any loot that was down there. I ended up not swimming her across to the first island because I thought a boat might be quicker. While we were out at sea, the rain cleared, revealing a sunken wreck. I took a dive and scored some horse XP potions and a few gems and bars. We saw another whale who looked slightly smaller than Atlas, but it was still awesome. When we arrived, oh wait, I guess I should inform you now that if I say we, I mean Dogbert and I, because now I know she can respawn, she's invited to every adventure. Okay, so when we arrived, I downed a water breathing potion and started to mine straight down. It didn't take long for me to bust into the dungeon, and I quickly resurfaced to fill the walls with gravel so that I could put a rope in for me to climb. Now, just with the knowledge that I'm digging down and placing ropes as I go, I want you to take a wild guess at the mistake I made next. Oh my god. Not fatal this time, thankfully, but there was a habit forming and I didn't like it. After my broken legs had made a recovery, I came up the rope to free Dogbert from the boat, revealing it was now day 219. Dogbert came down with me this time, and the first chest I saw gave me some decent items. We began exploring, and I will admit that the atmosphere down here was really creepy because there was actually a gap in the walls where mobs would spawn so you could hear them, but when you rounded the corner ready for a fight, there was nothing there. I did feel a bit disappointed that there wasn't more interesting loot or cool rooms to find. There were these libraries that had chests hidden in them, but that was sort of it. I did eventually find the place I was looking for, the end portal room. It had a silverfish spawner in it, but I quickly took that out so that I could count how many eyes were missing from the portal frame. I counted 11 and decided I had had enough exploring for today and wanted to head home. It was going to be a piece of cake getting the eyes if I didn't have them already, and other than making sure I had enough golden apples and arrows, I would have no trouble in the fight against the Ender Dragon. When we arrived back on land, Nova was fast asleep before I had to wake her up so that we could go home. When we got back, I popped Nova in her stall and she went back to sleep pretty soon after. Day 220 consisted mostly of sorting the contents of my massive backpack and throwing away junk I just didn't need. As the rain cleared up, I set about making the entrance and hallway to my grinder elevators nicer than it currently was, as it was nothing more than a hole in the ground followed by a tunnel. As I was doing that, my brain began to wander, and I was thinking about the next 100-day series I wanted to start. We were meant to have filmed it over Christmas break, but I never got round to it, so here, I'll pitch you the idea, and you can tell me in the comments if you want to see this video. So the premise was 100 Days in Minecraft Equestrian Edition with zombies. I created a mod pack to make Minecraft into a post-apocalypse game, and the goal would have been to survive by starting with nothing but a horse and some basic tools, while the undead tried their best to end my life for your entertainment. After I tested the mod pack, I found it to be far too scary, so my best friend Queasy offered to join me in the challenge. What do you think? Would you like to see that video? I had made great progress on my tunnel. It certainly wasn't my best work, but there is only so much I could do with a hole in the ground. I I spent day 221 finishing up the tunnel and fixing the elevator because I broke it. Anyway, I don't think I actually got to show you the elevator in action yet. So the one on the left had a magma block at the bottom so the bubbles would pull you down, and the one on the right had a soul sand which pushed you up. They were pretty handy, but I wouldn't build one again unless I had a solid reason to. A rope would have worked just as well here. I spent the next 2 days grinding until day 223 when I finally hit XP level 45. I really wanted to enchant my bow and some other items, so I headed to my chanting basement to get started. I had a spare bow I wanted to throw into the mix, and holy moly, I got infinity. The infinity enchantment meant that all you needed was one arrow in your inventory, and it would allow you to shoot as many arrows as you like. It also had power 4 and unbreaking 3. I ran to my storeroom to rename it social distancing 2 and to ditch my old bow. After that, I scored a silk touch golden pick with unbreaking 3 and efficiency 4. Talk about lucky. After that, I crafted a few hitching rings to put on the stalls to make tying and untying the horses a little easier. Then I gave them all a good brush and sorted my storage a bit more. I found a treasure map amongst all of the junk that I must have picked up, and I decided after a few days of monotony, I would venture out to find this treasure tomorrow. After a good snooze, it was day 224. I gave Dogbert her breakfast, ate a roast potato, and got rejected by Jeffrey. After a bit of consideration, I decided to grab Sporkle's Tack and bring her in from the field. She stood perfectly while I brushed and tacked her up, and then we set off in the direction of the dungeon because I had found the map in a sunken wreck near there. As we swam towards the island, water started filling in on my map, so I knew we were going the right way. Soon we hit land and I was able to see the X which marked the spot. I was a little concerned since this was actually my first time looking for buried treasure, and I'd seen so many memes about how difficult it was to find, but I suppose luck was on my side and I found it in no time. While I was there, I also grabbed some flowering azalea leaves since I didn't have any and I thought that they would look really cute as decoration. On my way back, it got really dark and I spotted this weird sea tarantula looking thing, but I only saw it for like a second and it was dark, so I wasn't even sure what it was exactly. I then spent way too long swimming around trying to find it again to no avail. Some dolphins who probably thought I was nuts came over. Luckily, I had some fish on me, and in exchange for a snack, they led me to yet another sunken ruin. They did leave me there while I was looting those, so I was left to slowly swim all the way back to where I'd left Sporkle. I was then absolutely terrorized by mobs on my way home. When I finally got back, there was more item sorting to be done yet again. My sorting bled well into day 225 and I opted to do various farm chores. I discovered the achievements and I wanted to try doing one where I used the skillet to cook something while I was holding it, but I was having trouble figuring out how to make it work. My big brain thought that maybe it wasn't recognizing the stove as a heat source, and the next best thing was the lava that was sitting in my disposal. I then proceeded to do the dumbest thing I think I have ever done in Minecraft. Oh my god, that was so dumb. I feel like we all make a mistake like that at least once, so we never do it again, but that thought did nothing to minimize how thoroughly embarrassed I was from that death. I was standing on a trapdoor above lava and just pulled the lever with seemingly no concept of consequences. My gravestone had deleted the lava, so while my items were safe, I needed to replenish the lava. I used the time it took to go over by my portal to have a good long think about my actions. After fixing my disposal, I fed the mini donkeys some spare hay and tried my hand at cooking various meats. Then I went to bed, still mildly ashamed. Day 226, I wanted to go into the Nether to grab some glowstone with my new Silk Touch pickaxe. It was a bit of a hassle to get since I had to build up and then make a platform to catch all the blocks before they fell into lava, so this was starting to get a little bit time consuming. I then robbed a dude of his backpack so I could get his disc, and he sent an army to try and mess me up, but I outsmarted them by using 3 blocks to stay out of their reach. They did drop a nice bit of XP and gold nuggets though. I had spent so long in the Nether that it was now day 227. To try and make it up to the community of piglins, I attempted to trade with a golden bar, but got scammed by a child after he took my bar and gave me nothing for it. I then promptly ended his life. Twat. I don't personally believe in karma, and while I can recognize that the events that followed were due to lapse in my own judgment, it did feel like perhaps I deserved it.
Yeah, so far all my deaths in this challenge have been me not thinking about the consequences until after I'd done the action. After sheepishly retrieving my items and running home with my tail between my legs, I put those hard-earned glowstones to good use by lighting up the entirety of my racetrack. Day 228 started off like most days in the UK, rainy and dark. I spotted another lost bee and rescued it. Since there were now 2 cases, I was sure they were coming from my hives and getting lost. Other than that, it wasn't a particularly exciting day. I just did more sorting and some crafting. I ended up making a Netherite knife and calling it Stabby Abby. And no, my name isn't spelled A-B-B-Y, it's spelled A-B-I because it's a shorthand from Abigail. Despite the fact that A-B-B-Y would have gone perfectly with the word Stabby, I just couldn't bring myself to spell my name like that. In the night, I started thinking about the goal that was adjacent to beating the Ender Dragon, throwing myself a "yay I beat the Ender Dragon" party. I made some oak tables and started putting up some poles in the hopes that I could hang some fairy lights and maybe letter bunting. I tested out the poles using leftover string lights and I was pretty happy with their placement. Day 229, I discovered that you can train the foals using the desensitization items. This was absolutely awesome because when they grew up, they'd be well on their way to being easy rides. I wanted to build a round pen to train them in instead of just doing it in the field, so I started clearing some land near the farm. The round pen was pretty small, so it didn't take too long to finish construction. Much like the arena, I left the ground as grass, mostly out of laziness. It was the late afternoon when I put in the gates to the pen, which turned out to be very frustrating because it was a full wide gap. So I got 2 horse care gates, but they wouldn't line up unless one of them opened the wrong direction. Excited to try out the new pen, I grabbed each of the foals to have a quick session with. Not only were they being handled, which would greatly improve their bond with me, but also they were learning how to be away from their parents for a short period of time. I left Nova's foal in the paddock while I got Sporkle's foal in the pen, but I feel like this was counterproductive since being completely by yourself is just too much of a big step at that age. Next time I would bring both of the foals together to see if that worked out better. Day 230, I left Dogbert roaming near her bowl because I figured I would stay home for a little while. After restocking the feed bins and giving the horses grain, I grabbed both foals and led them to the round pen. The good thing about the placement of the pen was that they could see and hear their parents, but be separated enough that they would start to gain independence. They quickly got the hang of being led, and I felt like Sporkle's foal was the most confident out of the 2. Since they were younger, I opted to tie Nova's foal outside the pen so that they could watch their half-sibling go first. It was barely the afternoon when we were finished, and they actually interacted with a bale golem for the first time on their way back. Look at this little cutie holding some oats. He wasn't that interested in getting to know the foals, so I promptly turned them both back out. In a show of independence, they both stood with each other for a moment before running to Nova, most likely to tell her about their day. She didn't seem that enthralled. Sporkle had enjoyed her time off thanks to daycare and didn't seem in a rush to see her kid. To be fair, these foals had spent a really long time with their parents and they were more than ready to start working with. I took the rest of the day to do farm chores and to light up the hole under the sheep pasture to stop the mobs from spawning. Day 231, I'd actually added a data pack into my game. This would allow me to craft name tags as I had so many mobs to name and nowhere near enough tags. For some reason, I chose my barn cows to be the first to be named. Please meet Mona Lisa, Kim Kardashian, Mudonna, and Greg. Soon, it was time to take the foals out again, once again grabbing both of them from the field and tying Nova's foal outside while Sporkle's foal went first. This time we started with waving the plastic bag around, which did spook them, but they very quickly calmed down and realized it wasn't actually dangerous. I then gave them a full brush and an apple. Then it was Nova's foal's turn and they were much less happy with the bag and ended up kicking me. It didn't do too much damage, and once they relaxed, I also brushed them and rewarded them with an apple. Much like the day before, once they were released into the field, they ran over to Nova and started pestering her again. I had one more thing I wanted to do today, which was to make a cake. This cake would go into my fridge until day 300 when I would put it onto the table for the party. I grabbed all the ingredients and smooshed it all together raw, somehow making an edible dessert. Day 232, I finally remembered that if I name tagged the foals, I could see their gender. I couldn't pick the names yet because the foals could grow up to have very different coats to what they were showing right now. It was revealed that Sporkle's foal was a girl and Nova's was a boy. That worked out perfectly, but I'm not going to
to breed them because they are half siblings. I grabbed them both for some morning training. The filly actually had a breakthrough today as she became completely desensitized to the plastic bag, being rewarded with a brush and an apple as usual. The colt was also doing very well standing outside the pen being tied, but he absolutely hated the bag and kicked at me again. But from watching his sister, he too became desensitized to the bag, and I decided to let them both have some time in the round pen, just to help start introducing them to weaning. They were free to wander around together, and I was staying on the farm anyway, so I wouldn't be far. I went to go get some honeycomb from the hive so that I could make some candles for the party, but I forgot to smoke the bees and they came after me. Usually I do a good job at avoiding them, but somehow one of the bees reached me and stung me. He ended up being brown bread. I tried to decorate the party area with letter bunting, but it wouldn't work. This would actually be an omen of things to come. Day 233, we were back at foal training as usual, but these little ones were making such great progress. So much so that when I turned them both out, the colt ran to sporkle, but the filly was just happy to take a moment and stand before leisurely making her way over. What a queen. I then grabbed Jericho so that we could tack up and go for a ride. I needed beetroots for a kebab recipe, and I wanted to have an adventure after spending so many days at home. The trio was back with Dogbert in tow, and I headed across the meadows and towards a direction that was largely unexplored. It did begin to rain on our parade, quite literally. While we took cover in the woods, I came across more wolves, and the question was brought up again, should I get another dog? I kind of wanted another dog. Ideally, it would be male so that Dogbert could have some puppies. I didn't bring any bones though, so that would have to wait. As it got dark, I started exploring the area on foot and got absolutely hammered by creepers that were practically invisible in the foliage. Day 234 was much brighter, so we all set out in search of new lands. I sort of hoped to find a swamp biome because that was a big one that I hadn't found yet. As we were making good progress, my game suddenly crashed and my heart stopped. Oh my god, Jericho. I feared that he had suffered the same fate as Rocky after the last crash, and I hoped with my full heart that that was not the case. I was a little horrified to find that the day had restarted, much like it had done the day I lost Rocky. I scrambled to see if Jericho was there where I'd hitched him, and I was so happy to see that he was okay. That could have gone a very different way. I started to get the feeling that this world was becoming more and more unstable. Nevertheless, I still had 66 days to go, so on we pop. We recovered our progress and journeyed onwards. Then I almost killed Jericho by running into Hemlock. We were covering good ground until the biome changed to bamboo forest. This was like the one biome that was swem horse kryptonite. I opted to swim along the border instead and managed to catch a live pufferfish. We were then back onto meadows and I window shopped some wild horses, knowing full well that I could never get one because I already had 5 horses at home. Then we found this pretty little village and I decided to bed down here for the night. Day 235, I perused the village for stuff I could take and realised some of their crops were beetroots. That checked that off the list. All I had to do left was have an adventure, but I can't lie, it was a bit boring out here. There was nothing new and certainly no swamps, so after a little while I decided to just head home. But on the journey back, Jericho and I became best friends forever, which was just lovely. Day 236, I crafted these treat strings, but they look so much like kebab skewers that I added them to my evolving party space. Paired with a grill and some buffet tables, I thought the place was really starting to come together. Then we did some more, you guessed it, foal training. As usual, they were doing really well, with the filly definitely happier being a leader as she was generally more confident than the colt. I decided to leave them in the round pen again as it worked really well last time. I headed to my kitchen to make some stuffed pumpkin and that took all day for some reason. Day 237 was pretty much the same thing, with me just starting off the morning working with the babies and then doing some cooking during the day. Day 238, to spice up their routine a little bit, we practiced standing while being tied, which they were brilliant at after all the work. We needed some onions and ham for my recipes, so I grabbed Nova so we could go look for some. She was really fresh and kept rearing and bucking. She probably needed more exercise than I gave her, but at least today she was out and moving. We went to the top of the hill with a village on it and I discovered wild llamas. For a second I did think about bringing some home, but I had absolutely no use for them and would need yet another enclosure. I let them be and continued my search. I found some wild onions, which I was happy to harvest. And did anyone read the book Holes in school? Because I remember that bit where the dude escapes and is living off wild onions and making them sound absolutely delicious. Yeah, that's a bit left field, but it did pop into my head while I was gathering. I ended up at the village in the valley, and I may have killed all their pigs in my quest for ham, which was successful, by the way. We headed home, and I grabbed some bottles of honey from my hives and started making some honeyed ham. Day 239, I was in my garden grabbing some fresh veggies to make salad for the party. I popped a bowl of greens on a chopping board that doubled as a plate on the buffet table. I went to ask Jeffrey if he wanted some, but as usual, he didn't want to know. If my calculations were correct, then tonight would be the night that I will fall for you. Sorry, the foals grew up. I thought it would be best to separate them from the adults and put them in a round pen overnight. I was so very excited to see what they would look like all grown up. Just as the first light was peeking over the horizon on day 240, I rushed out my house to see if the foals had indeed grown up. As I rounded the stables, I could already see that they had. Sporkle's foal was this gorgeous light palomino, and Nova's was this really beautiful, well, I don't even know what you'd call this coat. Let me know in the comments, but he's so pretty. A storm broke out overhead and it started absolutely pouring down. This wasn't going to stop my naming ceremony, as I picked out two names, which were Sunny for the filly. This name was really popular and suggested by a lot of people. And Comet for the colt. Thank you guys so much for helping me pick their names. As much as I wanted to stand in awe of my homebred horses, it was pelting down with rain, so I thought it was best to bring them into their new paddock. This section hadn't had a horse step foot in yet, and it was much bigger than the one behind the stables. I gave Sunny and Comet their first grain feed and rushed back over to my storehouse to craft them some blankets and halters. I decided Sunny's colour would of course be yellow and that Comet's would suit a royal blue. On my way back, I grabbed everyone's blankets and threw them on as I was going past. I knew the storm was getting bad when lightning started striking and I could hear the roar of thunder. This wasn't the best way to be eased into adulthood, especially when they didn't have a shelter. I only had 3 stalls, so there genuinely was no room for them. After blanketing them both and quickly having a look at a flat bit of land in their paddock, I ran back over to my storehouse to grab some materials so that I could throw up a shelter. Even with the choice of going indoors, the trio opted to huddle under a thin overhang. After swiftly clearing the grass, I put up some poles out of fences to serve as supports for a roof. This wasn't going to be anything fancy, and it was more meant to get the horses out of the rain and to eliminate the chance of them being struck by lightning. Once it was complete, I led both horses under it, satisfied that at least they had somewhere to go and stand away from the barrage of water. Then I went to bring in all the other horses because I just wasn't too keen on leaving them outside. While it was still raining, I opted to craft Sunny and Comet's feed bowls and a new water trough for their paddock. Day 241 was lovely and clear, so I thought it would be a great day to start backing the young horses. If you don't know what backing means, it's basically when you get onto their back and start riding. Of course, in real life, you take many sessions before you'd even actually start riding, but in my head, I'd been working with the youngsters quite a lot, so I'm sure it was fine for me to jump on. As usual, I grabbed them both together so that Comet could watch while Sunny started the session off. She stood really nicely while I popped the training saddle and spare blanket on, and I made sure she was super comfortable and the girth wasn't too tight before swapping her halter for a bridle. That was when she had her first unhappy moment, but it was less of a complete freak out and more of a what the heck. When I got on and started riding around, we had absolutely zero problems. She was happy as Larry, whoever that is. When it was Comet's turn, he tried to run back to his paddock after I unhitched him, which was a pretty clear indicator of how he must have been feeling about the activity. After I wrangled him back and got the saddle pad and saddle on, he said a hard no thank you. It took a bit of time to calm him down and get him into the round pen. Unsurprisingly, he wasn't very happy with me on his back, but just like his sister, he settled in nicely after a little while, and I hopped off as soon as he had a positive experience. It was now the late afternoon, and the ponies had worked hard enough that it was now time for them to chill out in the paddock. Then I beat a zombie to death with a pom-pom. Day 242, I went into the field to grab Sunny, but not before making sure she drank her fill and ate all of her grain. I also dished out my swem potions, making Sunny a better jumper and Comet faster. I took both horses out again as there was been no one else besides Comet in the field, and considering he had basically never been without Sunny his whole life, this probably would have stressed him out. I hitched him to a post while I got Sunny tacked up for our ride. She actually hopped over the first jump but then refused the second. No worries, as this was literally her first time jumping, so the fact that she went over the first one was just amazing. After finding a rhythm, we really started to build a connection and she started to enjoy the work. I used up basically the entire day before leading both horses back into their paddock. I did go out in the night to set up some barrels so that I could work with Comet tomorrow. Day 245, I was up bright and early taking care of the horses. Now that I had 5 of them, I had to always know what items to grab and what order to do things in, or this part would take ages. Sunny ate her grain and I set Dogbert to roam in the paddock and keep her company while I took out Comet. I figured if he was busy working, then she would most likely be able to find comfort by herself, and that would help him be less clingy too. She was a little concerned when she saw him on the other side of the fence and watched him walk away. She could probably see the arena from there and would eventually get bored waiting. I tacked Comet up and this time we had no issues. Starting off with a gentle canter, we did some barrels and comb work. He really improved his speed and our bond in the short session. Surprisingly, Sunny was still waiting for him at the fence and he was pulling against the lead rope to go see her. Once I let him loose, he seemed a little bit happier. I spent the night lighting up their paddock with small fairy lights so that I could get rid of the ugly torches that were everywhere. Day 246, I made sure the horses had their food and water before turning my attention to the party area. I replaced the boring old lanterns for some super colourful fairy lights of different varieties. I strung up some pink and white bunting to add colour, because there definitely wasn't enough of that, and then I discovered that tinsel could wrap itself around the poles. It looked utterly ridiculous and I absolutely loved it. There was just so much colour and light, and now it's really starting to look like a party. I also made myself a pink cone to wear as a party hat. In the night, I organised my crates some more. Day 247, I felt like it was time for me to get another dog. My idea was to tame a wolf and either retire Dogbert to hang out in the paddock or have the new dog guard my fields. I grabbed Nova and we headed out to where I last saw some wolves. I found one in this little pond and fed them as many bones as they needed to be tamed. I did really love how the dogs had little sweaters on in my texture pack. I pulled them up out of the pond and kept them leashed since they didn't have the teleportation abilities that were as strong as Dogbert's. We got home and I untacked Nova before grabbing the dog treats to make them into a doggy talents dog. That's a lot of dogs. They were transformed and I was a little sad that they were a female, so no puppies for us. But I was really glad to have another dog, especially one that could guard my horses if any mobs got close. I decided to call her Ray because I just think that that's a really pretty name. Of course, after the death scare with Dogbert, my first priority was putting down a bed for her so that she could respawn. Much like Dogbert when she was younger, Ray enjoyed climbing all over my furniture. I actually set her to work immediately by putting down some patrol points in the back paddock to see how she would do. Day 248, I did my routine with the horses and was just sort of itching for more exploration. Monotony had taken hold these last few days and it was time to shake things up a bit. Grabbing Dogbert and Nova, I headed out towards the village on the mountain, but veered slightly right to try and go in a new direction. Day 249, we kept covering ground and I found this albino donkey. It was really pretty and I figured I had enough room in the back paddock, plus donkeys had zero maintenance. I tamed her and left a waypoint so I could grab her on my way back. The rest of the day we pressed onwards. Day 250, exactly halfway through, we climbed this mountain which revealed a gorgeous plateau. I mean, it really was just stunning. You could see over the tops of a huge spruce forest, there were flowers everywhere, it was relatively flat, and there was an interesting basin in the middle of the mountain. This would have been an incredible place to have set up a house and a farm. I spotted a pillager outpost and charged into battle with Dogbert. These guys were no match for me and I wiped them out really easily. Once I'd looted their sad little base, I took Nova to the edge of the mountain where we had the best sunset view I think I have ever seen in this game. Just breathtaking for something that was just cubes and lighting. Day 251, I spotted a village that was a short trek away and decided to head down the mountain. I feel like I'm not doing this area area any justice, honestly. There were so many gorgeous sights and I got to capture them all. Too many to show, in fact. By the way, I mentioned this at the start, but you can get these 100-day wallpapers from my website, abigailpinehaven.com, and there are quite a few from this location, as you can see why. The village wasn't anything special loot-wise, but in terms of location, this place was prime real estate. A lot of structures were on tiered land, but they didn't appear to have any weird drop-offs or issues. We pressed on a little bit further and I found another donkey, but this time he was a really lovely dark shade. He was certainly the stubborn type of donkey because when I tried to tame him, he dropped into a crevasse and tried to suffocate me in a wall. Look how stupid I look. This guy had captured my heart through and through, and I decided to press on further a bit and come back for him later. Day 252, I went as far as I could until I hit the ocean. I was a little sad that there were no new biomes for me, but the terrain generation in this area had been both epic and delightful. I turned back to go and get the donkey and we slept to the village for the night. Day 253, we were making slow progress towards the first donkey and I came across a jungle temple. I remember I used to adore finding these structures in my early days on Minecraft. I didn't know how to do the puzzle, so I just mined through it to get the chest. Day 254, I grabbed the albino donkey and headed home. This was when I noticed that all of my normal waypoints were missing for some reason, but luckily I already knew the way back from here. We made it home in the evening and I got Nova settled in her stall before grabbing both donkeys and heading to the back field. Sunny was the first to meet them and honestly didn't seem bothered. I then spent all night sorting the chests yet again. Day 255 was back to the routine and I really wanted to build something since I hadn't done a proper project yet. I think I've mentioned this before, but I love building things that are both pretty and practical. But right now, I just didn't need anything. I didn't want to extend or build new stables as the horses were better off in the fields anyway. This meant that I could only really build something that served no purpose other than looking pretty. I took a little bit of time to think about what I would like to make. Day 256, I had settled on the idea of building a windmill. I grabbed my granite and concrete, very much aware that I needed to make more. I watched this tutorial from Blitzheart, but wanted to change some of the blocks to fit my current palette and then got to work. I went down the hill to get a look at my current state and my heart dropped because it was a bit of an eyesore, but I had to trust the process and myself to get this done. Day 257, I was making progress but had discovered that a certain inability of mine was making the whole process rather difficult. You see, when I was about 8 or 9, I did the specialized test in school, and if I'm not incorrect, they would test to see if you had any learning disabilities. I excelled at the reading, writing, maths and logic puzzles, but there was one particular area that I scored so low on that they had to call my parents and tell them about it. You see, there was this part of the test where you had to make a big 3D shape out of these smaller shapes. My brain absolutely broke, and I discovered that I can't picture 3D shapes very well in my head. Thus, a joke was born that my only weakness was shapes. The relevancy here is that even though I could see the shape of the base in the tutorial, I was really struggling to put it into my own game correctly. I spent so much time trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. It took me so incredibly long to finish the exterior that it wasn't until day 262 that I could properly show you what it looked like. Man, did I struggle. Day 263, I headed out to gather some more wood, and day 264, I put in the interior. As I mentioned before, there was really no use for this windmill other than aesthetics, which I will admit, it did look really good now that it was done. I filled it with chests and crates and hay, knowing that I would realistically never go inside this building on a regular basis. On day 265, I added a small wheat farm next to the mill to help balance out the colours and at least make it look useful. Day 266 consisted on catching up on all of the chores that I had been neglecting around the farm and also adding fairy lights to the sheep paddock, once again removing the torches. Day 267, an idea popped into my head. A lot of you had asked if you could have my world file, and I think I will release it at some point, so if you do want it, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss when I announce where to get the file. But in the same vein, I wanted to make a guest house for you to stay in if you do visit my world. Of course, you're welcome to stay in my house, but just in case you wanted a place for yourself, I wanted to build an exclusive accommodation for you. I cleared some land at the very top of the mountain and started laying down down the outline. I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could do it freehand, but the shape was exactly the same as my tack room, so I ended up making it a rectangle. Day 268, I was happy with the outline and started putting up the walls, only to realize I had no white concrete left and I had to go make some. I crafted the powder and spent a lot of the night and some of day 269 turning it into concrete blocks. I was making progress and started on the roof. I headed down the mountain to see what the outline looked like, and yeah, not the biggest fan of it yet. Day 270, I looked up at the hill after coming out of my house and decided I absolutely hated it. The silhouette on the mountain was wrong, there wasn't enough space for everything I wanted, and I just wanted to tear it all down. So that's what I did. And then I started building you a new, better house using this photo from Creative New YT on Planet Minecraft. This time I placed it further down the mountain towards the back paddock, and I was much happier with the way it shaped my horizon. I started decorating the inside and a little bit of the outside until I was really happy with it. Day 273, I wanted to give you a tour of your house. So this is what it looks like from my window, and as we head over past the stables and the round pen and across from the back paddock, we get to your new house. I placed lots of leaves and flowers to make it look a little bit overgrown and cottagecore, but you are welcome to remove those if you want a cleaner look. Then we head into the living room / kitchen combo. We've got a great big window, comfy blue sofas, and a bookshelf. I also placed down this backpack which you can grab. Then you can open this barrel in the corner of the bookshelf to grab your favorite color and dye the bag just like I personalized mine. The kitchen has all you need with lots of cupboards, a fridge, stovetop, and cutting board. Nothing too fancy, but I'm sure it will serve you well. Then we go up the ladder into your bedroom. This was a little bit tricky because the space was a little bit small, but I think I did an okay job. You've got your bed and a headboard, shelving space up high, and some bookshelves. The balcony is one of my favorite parts as you can look out onto the farm, the paddock, and the arena. You've just got great views all around. Plus, there is some cute chairs for you to relax in. I really hope you like the house I built for you, and as I said, if you do play on this world, you are more than welcome to customize it to your liking. I still had a little bit of daylight left and I wanted to start on your garden. I definitely wanted to build a miniature version of my greenhouse as well as bring over some bees. I placed out the outline before retiring to my sleeping bag. Day 274, I grabbed my glass and started putting in your greenhouse. As I said, it was much smaller than the main one, but instead of housing bees, I wanted to grow a few crops in it instead. Once it was complete, I went to get some fresh carrots from my garden and rich soya from the muck pile. Only the best for my guest, of course. There really wasn't much room at all for crops, but I did manage to squeeze in this 2x2 planter bed. I also popped in some tables for potted plants too. Day 275, I placed in a stone path from the entrance to the greenhouse. Then I shaped the back of your garden a little bit using these cute white picket fence and placed down sunflowers at the side of your house. Then I went absolutely ham placing flowers down. I had some spare fairy light lanterns that I wanted to string up at the side of the house, but the detailing made it a little bit awkward. It ended up looking like this, which wasn't great, but it would have to do. The final thing I did that day was clear a tiny patch of elevated ground so I could put in a tree and maybe a hammock. Day 276, I crafted a yellow hammock and an orange tree. Once the orange tree was fully grown, I used 2 logs as the support for the other side of the hammock. It was really cute and I wanted to demonstrate what it would look like if you lay down on it, only to accidentally skip the day and turn it to night. Great! I decided the area needed a water feature and made this really crude looking running waterfall. Not my favourite thing ever, but it was still cute, right? Day 277, I did some more detailing and gave your house a nice sign above the door. Oh, and I also left a knife in your house just in case you need it. Day 278, Jeffrey took the mick out of me by tossing some raw pork chop on the roof of his stall. It was meant for Dogbert, which I thought was a bit mean, so I gave her my steak instead. We set off in the boat to go get even more wood. This was because I was finally going to add fencing to my arena as it looked a little bit strange without it. As I was deforesting the area, I looked out onto the water hoping to see Atlas, but he didn't seem to be around. Day 279, I started on the fencing. It was the same design that I had used for the round pen and consisted of logs and slabs. I got most of the way around before I had to cut into the corner of a hill in order to get a straight line. Once the fencing was in place and finished, I had to go back to that corner and terraform it to look a little more natural. I genuinely despise terraforming, mostly because I'm really bad at it. Then this baby zombie scared the bejesus out of me. Day 280, I successfully completed the terraforming on the corner and started to make a little tack up / waiting area. Honestly, it didn't make sense for me to bring Sunny and Comet all the way to the stables just to tack up, so having a little hitching area would be really handy. Day 281, I continued with the hitching area, successfully setting up posts as well as some spare feeders and water troughs just in case they needed them. I decided to also tack on a tiny little paddock square, mostly thinking about Comet if he ever got too anxious to be left alone and needed to see Sunny while I worked with her. It was a really cute little pen equipped with everything a horse may need to be in there short term. Then I attempted to light up the arena to help combat mob spawning. I was now all in on equipping this side of the farm, so on day 282 I put up a covered shed thing that I could store some quality hay bales in. It was a bit annoying needing to have them on hand all the time, and this would mean that there were always some close by even if I was in the back paddock. I ended up bringing over loads of extra things like some training gear, spare head collars, and crates to hold everything. Day 283 was pretty quiet as it consisted of even more inventory sorting. Honestly guys, I can't even explain how much time I had to dedicate to putting items in the correct boxes. It was a constant management issue and it ate into so many of my days here, but I didn't really have the energy to figure out and implement a new system, so I just sucked it up and got on with it. Day 284, I decided to have my last official adventure. Considering my last 200 days ended or almost ended in disaster because I tried to push my luck right at the end, I would play this ultra safe this time and leave 16 days spare. I chose Sunny for my ride as she was really growing on me and she had the confidence that Comet just didn't possess yet. This would be a really good chance to build up her skills and bonding as well as give me something stimulating to do. I wanted to go and check out the woodland mansion I had spotted all the way back on day 80 something, so we headed off past the meadows and onto the shores near the bamboo forest. I could have left Sunny behind for a boat, but this wasn't about getting the job done quickly, so we had a lovely leisurely swim across the sea. When we landed on the island, I struggled through the trees to reach one side of the mansion. Making sure Sunny was safely hitched, I broke my way in and started exploring with Dogbert. This was again my first time exploring a woodland mansion, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I was hoping for some good loot, especially a totem of undying. I explored the various rooms and discovered some curious structures like this large table, a wall room, a bedroom, libraries, and some sort of fight arena. It was very interesting to see what each room had inside, as well as wonder what the lore behind this was. I don't know if this is normal, but no vindicators spawned here, just lots of zombies and creepers. I spent a lot of time in the mansion, and it was strangely comforting to be inside a structure that I hadn't built myself. It sort of made me feel like maybe I wasn't alone in this big vast world. After not much loot and seeing all there was to the mansion, I headed outside on day 285. I grabbed Sunny and headed back home. I couldn't quite believe what I found next, or should I say who I found. As the scar got a long list of... Rocky? Oh my god! Oh my god! Is that Rocky? Oh my god! Oh my god, it's Rocky! It's Rocky! There's no way. There's no way. This is Rocky. Oh my god. I don't know how, I don't know why, but the horse that I thought had been wiped from existence was standing right in front of me. I had found Rocky! I could not believe my eyes, so much so that I was fully expecting him just to disappear right in front of me. But I started to get a sinking feeling when Sunny started acting strangely. What's up with Sunny? Why is Sunny broken? Hello? I feel like I'm gonna crash. Sunny's stuck. I think... Is this really Rocky? He's like glitched Sunny out. She was stuck in the drinking animation and I couldn't get on her. I was deathly afraid that Rocky was corrupted and that he would break Sunny, or worse, crash my game for good. Sunny's like broken. I don't know why Sunny's broken. After pulling both horses out of the water, I inspected Rocky a little bit closer. His hunger and thirst bar was surprisingly high for a horse that hadn't been fed grain in 186 days. This suggested to me that he hadn't been spawned in for the majority of that time, or else his bars would have been completely depleted. Either way, I was so incredibly happy to have him back. Oh my god, Rocky's actually here. I can't believe it. When I woke up on day 286, I expected it to have all been a dream, but there he was, fully tacked up from the day I lost him. I had a theory as to what may have happened, but my priority was getting him home first. Sunny was still bugged out just like she had been last night, and I did panic a little, but after removing her tack, she seemed to be able to break free of the animation. Once she was seemingly back to normal, I tacked her back up and ponied Rocky. Thinking about it now, I don't think Rocky had ever been ponied before, let alone by a horse he'd never met. Oh my goodness, he had so many new horses to meet, and the donkeys too. This made me think about Jack, and I wondered if Rocky would notice he was gone. Then again, it's not like the two of them spent that much time together. They were both very independent animals. It was so surreal leading Rocky down the racetrack and across the farm. The last time he was here, most of this area looked completely different. I could only imagine what a shock this must have been, considering that after he was lost, everything continued to move on. I felt a really deep pang of guilt when I realized that he didn't have a stall anymore. His old stall was now Nova's, and I only had 3 for the 6 horses. Man, I have a lot of horses. It suddenly occurred to me that I only had one thing that would solidify if this was Rocky or not. I dashed upstairs and grabbed his old tack box. Doing a quick comparison of the two confirmed that this was absolutely, without a doubt, my Rocky. I smiled when I put his head collar on, knowing that it was no longer a room decoration as it was returned to its rightful equine. I quickly untacked him and gave him a thorough brush. Then I made sure to untack Sunny, and while I didn't have a dedicated stall, instead of forcing him out into the paddock with a bunch of horses he's never met, I let him stay in his old stable. First I popped Sunny out into the back paddock and then made Rocky comfortable inside. Jericho, Sporkle and Nova could see into his stall, but there was only a mild curiosity, and I was appreciative that they weren't the type of horses to bust down a door just to see who was in there. After watching him for a bit, I decided to go to bed, once again suspecting that he wouldn't be there the next day. I was once again proved wrong when I found Rocky standing in Nova's stall right where he was supposed to be. I made sure he drank and ate and then opened the stable doors to let him wander out and rediscover his old paddock. Only Rocky wasn't too keen on that. If you remember from the first 100 days, Rocky was found on a mountain by himself, shared a paddock with a donkey who he never interacted with, and was almost anti-social when presented with other animals. He had not changed one bit and wasn't interested in meeting any of the 3 main horses who were in this paddock. He did look at Nova at one point, but quickly turned around disinterested. After a little while, it became pretty clear that he didn't gel with Nova, Sporkle or Jericho, so instead of forcing it, I led him through the back paddock to meet Comet and say hi to Sunny. After that, I wanted him to see the improved arena. He was the first one to be ridden in there, back before it had railings of course. I showed him the arena, he looked at it, looked at me, looked back, and then at me again. No idea what was going through his head. It was either, wow, the arena looks so different, or do I look like I care? Rocky seemed more curious looking at Comet over the fence than he had been at any of the other horses. I decided to try and leave him out in the back paddock, and maybe I'm crazy, but Rocky and Sunny definitely had a connection. What do you guys think? Day 288, I did my routine, but this time for 6 horses. I crafted Rocky his very own lime green feeder, and after both Sunny and Comet were finished having their breakfast, I put it down so that he could eat. I can imagine that the new paddock situation was better than being stabled all the time, especially for a horse who was truly wild at heart like Rocky. I dared to have our first ride again. I tacked him up in the same adventure gear he always wore and took him over to the arena that I'd shown off to him yesterday. I had a lot of fun riding around and getting used to him again. At the end of the day, my heart was happy, but my head was now angling to focus on my final task. But as I was riding Rocky back to the stables, I had an idea, one that was so crazy, it might actually work. Day 289 was upon us, and I only had 11 days to sort out my plan. If you aren't up to speed, I'm going to fight the Ender Dragon on horseback. The first phase of the plan was going to get Rocky to max level on as many stats as possible. This also required me to make horse health items such as fly sprays and health boosters, which I had to brew myself. Then I took Rocky out onto the track and we trained all day, improving his speed, jump, and health. It was a hard workout for him, and unfortunately resulted in having to be put in a stall so I could make sure he never missed a meal and we didn't waste too much time going to and from the paddock. Day 290, we were back on the track all day. While Rocky slept, I went into a small patch of free land by the sheep paddock and set up these hay bale targets so that I could practice my bow skills. Bows were essential to beat the Ender Dragon, and while I had occasionally used mine, I had to be so confident that I could do it on horseback. But for now, we were starting on the ground and getting used to the arc of the arrow and how long it took me to draw the bow to its full potential. Day 291, I geared Rocky up for another day on the track. This time though, I set up some hay bale targets along the length of the track at varying heights and distances. I jumped on Rocky and we started off at a leisurely trot as I attempted to hit the targets. I did an alright job for my first time. I managed to hit a few of them, but there were a couple that I whiffed on every shot. As the day went on, I got a little better with each shot. Rocky kept me straight as an arrow, and it allowed me to focus on the bow rather than steering, which I really appreciated. Once we lost the daylight, I settled Rocky in his stall and went back to the basics using the straw bales as target practice. I did this with my UI off so I could get a more natural feeling for where the arrow would land. Day 292 was more of the same. I was rapidly improving, now able to shoot targets at a canter and hit them most of the time. It was actually a pretty fun activity and I would highly recommend it even if you aren't aiming to fight the Ender Dragon. It was only the late afternoon when I ended our training and let Rocky rest for the remainder of the day. In the night, I gave myself a break too and decided to put up some lampposts near your house in the arena. Day 293, I let Rocky have the day off so he could be in the paddock with Sunny and Comet. I also used this time to breed my bees and make sure the hives at your house were occupied. I also got to spy on the horses from your house where I saw Ray, Comet and Rocky standing together under the shelter. Then when it was nighttime, Sunny and Rocky did the cutest thing by snuggling up to each other. Do you guys remember when Jericho and Sporkle did this? Gosh, that was so adorable. As lovely as the day off had been, it was now back to work. I was running out of time, so Rocky and I focused on maxing his stats. I did some evening riding in the arena and look how many health hearts he has. You would need an army to take this horse down, or maybe a dragon. Day 295, we were back on the track, but this time, I felt like I was really hitting the mark. I started getting pretty good at hitting the targets in a row, which was actually quite challenging at a canter. Then I took Rocky out for a ride in the meadows just to help break the cycle of straight lines and fenced-in arenas. We ended up having a nice swim in the nearby stream too. Day 296, I discovered that the Netherite armor had a wings variation, and I thought that this style suited Rocky the best. I decided today's training would include the armor so that he could get used to the way it felt and how much it weighed. I was finally getting the hang of tracking the targets as I went past, which meant my shots landed far more often and were more accurate. But as we went up and down the track, despite the amazing progress we both made, I had this feeling that this wasn't enough. All we had done was practice on bales and run in straight lines. We needed to actually put our skills to the test on a live battlefield. So when night fell, instead of retreating to the safety of the farm, we stayed out in the meadows and set about killing any mobs we could until the sun rose. It was definitely more challenging as I had to steer Rocky and shoot, and after a while my finger ached from awkwardly holding down the left alt key. I will admit though, once I got the hang of things, I really started to feel my confidence grow. It was a lot to think about all at once and I missed my fair share of shots, but overall being in a more live situation gave me a taste of what the Ender Dragon might require. As the sun rose on day 297, we headed home. I had a lot of sorting to do today today to make sure I have everything I needed and we could leave for the portal tomorrow. I turned Rocky out in the back paddock and got to work on repairing my items to the max and making sure I had enough fly sprays and golden apples for health regen. Day 298 was now here and there was nothing left for me to do other than to feed Dogbert, make sure Rocky ate and drank before I tacked him up, and set off towards the portal. My waypoint was gone, but I knew the way there, so I wasn't too concerned. I did opt to leave Dogbert at home instead of taking her to the fight. Realistically, she couldn't do much from the ground, and even though she could respawn, it would still have been heartbreaking to see her die again, and I can't afford to get distracted. So it was just Rocky and I, day 14 and day 1. This was our fight to have, and despite all the time we had been apart, the last 10 days we had really reconnected, as if there wasn't still a grave with his name on it on the top of a mountain. It had occurred to me that there was a chance Rocky wouldn't walk away from this battle, but it wouldn't be right to do it without him, and I had done everything I could to give him the best chance at surviving. The rest was down to me making the right decisions at the right time. We got to the island near the portal by midday, and I took the chance to fish everything I needed out of my backpack and leave the rest behind. I didn't need much, but I did remember to bring a piston and a lever to be able to collect the dragon egg when we were finished. As the sun was setting, I headed down into the dungeon with Rocky and into the portal room. I activated it and stared into its starry blackness. I suddenly worried that Rocky couldn't go through the portal, but there was only one way to find out.
And just like that, I had done it. We had done it. I beat the Ender Dragon on a horse, and I'm pretty sure I'm the first one to have done it in a video. It was a grueling but epic battle. After we landed, I gobbled up all the XP, skyrocketing my levels. Then I quickly grabbed some endstone to build a platform up to the egg so that I could grab it. Despite our incredible win, Rocky had seemingly had enough of the end and went through the portal by himself. Oh? Okay. I didn't dawdle long and jumped in after him. Then I bawled my eyes out at the credits, which I won't show properly because they really mean something after you've played the game. Now I was back in the overworld and it was day 299. Amazingly, Rocky's armor gave him Frostwalker, so in the same fashion as the Ender Dragon fight, we epically rode across the water. What an absolute roller coaster this all was. I have more to say about these videos and the world, so make sure to watch until the end to find out the fate of this series. It was late when we finally arrived home and it was time for Rocky to rest. Not just rest, but officially retire. He was 286 days old, and even though he had spent the vast majority of that time wandering the wilderness, he had more than earned the permanent time off. He would continue to live out his days in the back paddock with Sunny and Comet. Before I went to bed for the final time, I had a few bits and bobs I wanted to set up for the party tomorrow. We did it! 300 days! From nothing but a campsite to a farm that I am proud to call home, this was the greatest journey I could ever wish for. So to celebrate, we're having a party. The birds were invited outside, Dogbert was here, Ray was invited too, but I'm not sure where she went. Of course Jeffrey was there too, more due to his stall placement than actually wanting to be there. We had a buffet with kebabs, salad, and a barbecue going, but there was one guest who was missing. As much as I would have loved to have all the horses at the party, 6 was a few too many. I did of course give them all apples as treats though. Rocky, the man of the hour. I don't think he was keen on a party, but I promised to leave him alone after this. So we got the party started with all my favorite animals who had become like family to me. We of course did some dancing by the speakers, and then I drank my apple cider for the first time ever. Then I munched on some kebabs. Then as the party started winding down and the music changed, we all gathered together. I started this challenge alone, unsure of what this world would become, but 90 hours, 3 videos, and so many positive comments later, here we were. I wasn't sure if anyone would like my 100-day video because it was so different to what I normally did, and I put so much effort and love into this series, and to have people tell me how much they enjoyed it and how they laughed and cried along with me, I think that's a testament to what we all built together. So I have to tell you the truth. This is the last video from this world. I started the 300 days fully expecting to go to 400 and even 500, but the truth is, this save is so broken and unstable that I can't justify carrying on. It's only a matter of time before something permanently breaks and I lose this world altogether. I'm choosing to end this series here, but I promise to bring you more 100-day videos. You can join me live and watch a new world be built in real time, be there every step of the way. And of course, I'll be making some unique mod packs to give as much variation and excitement to any future series as I can. This world will hold a special place in my heart, and I'll miss Dogbert and Rocky and all the others, but you never know, maybe they'll pop up again in the future. Either way, my time here is done, and all I can be is grateful as we watch the sunset over our home one final time.